Nate Wilder had $37 to his name when he found the old woman and the boy standing in the rain outside his house, soaked, shivering, and completely lost. He should have walked past them. He should have protected what little he had left. But the boy's eyes held the same terror Nate saw in his own daughter's faces every time the lights flickered from an unpaid bill, and something deeper than logic made him open that door. By morning, that single choice would unravel everything he thought he knew about survival, sacrifice, and what it really means to save someone when you can barely save yourself. If you want to see how one rainstorm changes 5 lives forever, stay with me until the end. And hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The rain hit Rockford like punishment. Nate Wilder stood at his kitchen window, watching water hammer the cracked pavement outside his rental house, and tried to calculate how many more days he could stretch $37. The math never worked. It hadn't worked for 3 months, not since Fletcher Manufacturing shut down the workshop floor and sent 200 workers home with 2 weeks severance and a photocopied list of job placement resources that led exactly nowhere. Behind him, Lily hummed while she colored at the kitchen table, her 8-year-old concentration absolute as she filled in the outline of a house she'd drawn, a house with a big yard and a dog and windows that didn't have duct tape holding the glass together. Mia sat beside her, 5 years old and small for her age, carefully arranging her 3 crayons in order from longest to shortest, then starting over again. The ritual calmed her. Nate had learned to recognize the small things that kept his daughter steady when everything else was falling apart. "Daddy?" Lily looked up, her blonde hair falling across her face. "Are we having spaghetti again?" Nate turned from the window, forcing a smile. "You love spaghetti." "I know." Lily went back to her drawing. "I was just asking." She wasn't just asking. She was counting, the same way Nate counted, the same way anyone counts when there's not enough of anything to go around. They'd had spaghetti 4 nights in a row because a 5-pound bag of pasta cost $3, and he could make it last. The jar of sauce was almost gone. Tomorrow he'd water it down, add some oregano, hope the girls didn't notice. Mia looked up at him with those serious dark eyes that always seemed too old for her face. "The lights are buzzing again." "I know, baby. It's just the storm." It wasn't just the storm. The wiring in this house was older than Nate, and the landlord had made it clear that repairs weren't his problem. But the rent was $600 a month, which was $300 less than anywhere else in Rockford, and Nate had learned not to ask for things he couldn't afford to demand. He moved to the stove, where a pot of water was starting to boil. Spaghetti night number 5. He'd add an egg to the sauce, make it stretch, tell the girls it was a special recipe. They'd believe him because they wanted to, because children have mercy built into their trust, and Nate carried the weight of that mercy like a stone in his chest. The workshop job had been good. Not great. Not the kind of work that made you rich, but solid. Steady. Nate had run the finishing station, sanding and staining custom furniture orders, and he'd been good at it. He had the hands for it, careful, patient, able to feel the grain of wood and know exactly how to bring out its character. He'd thought about starting his own business someday, maybe building custom pieces in a garage workshop, but that dream required capital and time and a safety net he'd never had. Now he built what he could at the kitchen table after the girls went to bed. Small things, cutting boards, picture frames, toy cars carved from scrap wood. He sold them online, $5 here, $12 there. Barely enough to matter, but just enough to keep trying. Last week, someone had bought 3 cutting boards and left a review calling his work rustic and heartfelt. And Nate had read those words over and over, trying to feel something other than tired. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like fists. Nate checked the ceiling corners out of habit, looking for new leaks. The bucket in the hallway was already half full from the drip near the bathroom. He'd empty it before bed, set it back, hope the rain stopped before it overflowed. "Can we watch a movie?" Lily asked. "After dinner, maybe, if the power holds." "What if it doesn't hold?" "Then we tell stories in the dark. Remember last time? You liked that." Lily smiled a little, remembering. Nate had made up an elaborate tale about a princess who lived in a castle made entirely of books, and Mia had fallen asleep before the ending, which meant Nate never had to figure out how it resolved. Small victories. He was draining the pasta when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. Mia's hand found Lily's across the table, an automatic gesture of reassurance that made Nate's throat tight. They shouldn't have to be this brave. They shouldn't have to know how to comfort each other through power failures and empty cupboards and the specific silence that comes when your father is trying not to break in front of you. He mixed the pasta with the watered-down sauce, divided it onto 3 plates, small portions for him, larger ones for the girls, and carried them to the table. Lily and Mia dug in without complaint, without even seeming to notice that this was the same meal they'd had 4 times already this week. Nate watched them eat and felt the familiar war between gratitude that they were fed and rage that this was the best he could do. "This is really good, Daddy," Lily said, and Nate knew she meant it, which somehow made it worse. They were halfway through dinner when Nate saw the movement outside. At first it was just a shape in the rain, indistinct through the water-streaked window. Then it resolved into 2 figures, one small, one stooped, moving slowly past the house. They weren't walking with purpose. They were drifting, the way people drift when they don't have anywhere to be. Nate stood, moving to the window for a better look. The smaller figure was a boy, maybe 7 or 8, wearing a thin jacket that was soaked through. The larger figure was an elderly woman, hunched against the rain, one hand on the boy's shoulder like she needed him for balance. They moved past Nate's house, turned at the corner, then stopped. Just stopped, standing there in the downpour like they'd forgotten what came next. "Daddy?" Lily had come to stand beside him. "Who are they?" "I don't know, baby." "They're all wet." "I know." Nate watched the woman sway slightly, watched the boy's hand come up to steady her. The rain was coming down so hard now that it blurred everything, turning the street into a gray wash of water and movement. The woman turned in a slow circle, looking around like she was trying to recognize where she was. The boy was talking to her. Nate could see his mouth moving, but the woman just kept turning, searching, lost. "Are they okay?" Lily's voice was small. Nate didn't answer. He was doing the math again, the math that never worked. He had $37. He had 2 daughters. He had a house that was barely holding together and bills he couldn't pay, and a future that looked like more of the same stretching out forever. He had nothing extra, nothing to spare. The woman stumbled. The boy caught her, but he was too small, and they both nearly went down. Somehow they stayed upright, clinging to each other in the rain. Nate's hand was on the doorknob before he'd decided to move. "Stay here," he told Lily. "Watch your sister." He stepped out into the storm. The rain hit him like a slap, cold and hard, soaking through his shirt in seconds. Nate jogged down the cracked walkway, calling out as he got close. "Hey, you folks need help?" The boy spun around, putting himself between Nate and the woman in a gesture that was pure protective instinct. Up close, Nate could see he was younger than he'd looked from the window. Maybe 6, rail thin, with dark hair plastered to his skull and eyes that were trying very hard to be brave. "We're okay," the boy said, and his voice shook. We're looking for..." The woman turned to face Nate, and he saw immediately that something was wrong. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, looking through him rather than at him. She was shivering violently, her gray hair hanging in wet ropes around her face, and when she spoke her words came out slurred and confused. Where is the house? Marcus said, the blue house. He said..." "Grandma, it's okay," the boy said, his voice cracking. "We'll find it." "Who's Marcus?" Nate asked gently. "I don't know," the boy whispered. "She keeps saying that name, but I don't know who that is." The woman's knees buckled. Nate caught her by the elbow, felt how cold she was, even through her soaked cardigan. She looked at him without recognition, without fear, just a distant puzzlement, like she couldn't quite figure out what was happening. "How long have you been out here?" Nate asked the boy. "I don't know. A while. We were at the park, and then she got confused, and we started walking, and..." His face crumpled, all that forced bravery collapsing at once. "I don't know how to get home. I tried to call my dad, but my phone's dead, and she doesn't remember, and..." "Okay, hey, it's okay." Nate made his voice steady, the same voice he used when Mia woke up from nightmares. "What's your name?" "Eli." "I'm Nate. This is my house right here. Why don't you both come inside, get dry, and we'll figure this out, okay? Eli looked at his grandmother, then back at Nate, and Nate saw the calculation happening. Stranger danger versus hypothermia, the math that kids shouldn't have to do. Then the woman stumbled again, and the decision made itself. Okay, Eli whispered. Nate got his arm around the woman's shoulders and guided her toward the house. Eli pressed close to her other side. They moved slowly, the woman's steps uncertain, and by the time they reached the front door, all three of them were shaking from the cold. Lily had the door open before they reached it, her eyes wide. Get some towels from the bathroom, Nate told her. All of them. He steered the woman to the couch, helped her sit. She sank into the cushions like all the strength had gone out of her, still shivering, still looking around with that lost, confused expression. Eli stood beside her, dripping onto the floor, not moving away. Lily returned with an armful of towels, thin, mismatched, but dry. Nate wrapped one around the woman's shoulders, handed another to Eli. What's your grandmother's name? He asked Eli. Evelyn? Evelyn Porter? Okay, Evelyn. I'm Nate. You're safe. You're inside now. Evelyn looked at him, and for a moment her eyes seemed to sharpen, to really see him. Where am I? You're at my house. You and your grandson got caught in the rain. We're going to get you warm and dry, and then we'll call your family. My family. She said the words like she was testing them. I'm supposed to. Her face crumpled with sudden distress. I can't remember. Why can't I remember? Eli grabbed her hand. Grandma, it's me. It's Eli. Evelyn looked at him, and Nate saw the moment the recognition slid away, saw her eyes go distant again. Eli, she repeated, but it was just a word, empty of meaning. The boy's face went white. Nate moved quickly, kneeling in front of Evelyn. It's okay. Sometimes when people get cold and tired, they get confused. Let's just focus on getting you warm. He looked at Lily, who was standing in the hallway with Mia now, both of them watching with huge eyes. Girls, can you go to my room and find some dry clothes? Anything warm? They scattered, grateful for a task. Nate turned his attention back to Evelyn, checking her hands. They were ice cold, the fingers bluish, and her breathing, which was too fast and shallow. When did you last eat? He asked Eli. Lunch? At school? Nate checked his watch. Past 7. Hours ago. He stood, went to the kitchen, ladled out 2 more bowls of the spaghetti. There wasn't much left, but there was enough. There had to be enough. He brought the bowls back, handed one to Eli. Eat this. Both of you. Eli took the bowl but didn't eat, just held it, looking at his grandmother. She doesn't usually. I know, it's going to be okay. She's sick. Eli's voice was barely audible. Isn't she? Nate looked at Evelyn, at the way her hands trembled as she held the bowl, at the confusion that clouded her face. He thought about lying, about offering easy comfort, but this kid had been navigating an impossible situation on his own for hours, and he deserved the truth. Yeah, Nate said quietly. I think she might be, but we're going to take care of her. Lily and Mia returned with an armload of clothes. Nate's flannel shirt, a pair of sweatpants, a sweater that had belonged to the girl's mother before she left. Nate helped Evelyn into the bathroom, helped her change while keeping his eyes averted, talking to her in a steady stream of gentle words that she didn't seem to hear. When he brought her back out, she looked smaller somehow, fragile in clothes that were too big for her. He got Eli changed too, the boy swimming in one of Nate's old t-shirts, and then he made them sit on the couch with blankets and urged them to eat. Eli managed a few bites. Evelyn just stared at the bowl. Do you have your dad's phone number memorized? Nate asked Eli. The boy nodded, rattled off 10 digits. Nate wrote them down, tried calling from his own phone. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. He left a message, brief, trying not to sound alarming, and hung up. He's probably working, Eli said. He works a lot. What does he do? He runs a company, import stuff. He's always in meetings. Nate tried the number again, voicemail. He sent a text, too, explaining the situation, asking for a call back. Then he sat down in the chair across from the couch and tried to figure out what to do next. Evelyn had finished shivering, which should have been good but somehow felt worse. She sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. Every few minutes she would startle, looking around like she'd just woken up, and then the confusion would settle back over her face like a fog. "Grandma?" Eli touched her hand. "Do you know where we are?" Evelyn looked at him, and Nate saw her struggling, saw her trying to pull something from a mind that wouldn't cooperate. I'm supposed to, there was something I needed to, it's okay. You don't have to remember right now." But she kept trying, kept reaching for something that wasn't there, and the frustration on her face was terrible to watch. Nate had seen confusion before. His own father had gotten turned around near the end, mixing up names and dates, but this felt different, sharper, more frightening. Mia climbed into Nate's lap, tucking herself against his chest. "Is the lady okay?" she whispered. "I hope so, baby." She looked sad. "Yeah, she does." They sat like that for a while, the six of them in Nate's small living room, listening to the rain hammer the roof. Nate tried the number twice more, voicemail both times. He was starting to think about emergency rooms, about ambulances he couldn't afford, and questions he didn't know how to answer when Evelyn suddenly stood up. "I need to go," she announced. "I'm late. He'll be waiting." Eli jumped up. "Grandma, we can't go. It's raining." "I don't care about the rain. I promised." She moved toward the door, unsteady on her feet. Nate intercepted her gently. "Evelyn, it's not safe out there. Why don't you sit back down?" She looked at him like he was a stranger threatening her. "Who are you? Where's Marcus?" "I'm Nate. We talked before, remember? You and Eli came in from the rain." "Eli." She turned, searching the room, and her eyes passed right over the boy standing 3 feet away. "Where's Eli? I need to find Eli." "I'm right here, Grandma." His voice broke. "I'm right here." But Evelyn didn't see him. She was looking past him, through him, searching for someone who wasn't there. "Eli's at school. I need to pick him up. I'm supposed to... What time is it? Am I late?" Nate felt Mia's arms tighten around his neck. Lily had gone very still, watching Evelyn with the kind of focused attention that meant she was trying to understand something that scared her. "It's okay," Nate told Evelyn. "Eli's safe. He's right here. You're both safe." No, you don't understand. I have to..." She pushed past him, reaching for the door, and Nate caught her arm. "Evelyn, please, just sit down for a minute." She yanked away from him, stumbling, and Nate saw the panic rising in her face, saw her breathing go fast and shallow. "Get away from me. I don't know you. Where's my son? I want my son." Eli was crying now, silent tears running down his face. "Dad's not here. I tried to call him, but..." "Then I'll call him myself. Give me the phone. Give me..." Evelyn was patting her pockets, searching for something that wasn't there. "Where's my phone? Did you take my phone?" "Nobody took anything," Nate said, keeping his voice level. "You're just confused right now. That's okay. Let's sit down." "I'm not confused. I know exactly what's happening. You're trying to keep me here. You're trying to..." She backed away from him, wild-eyed, and her shoulder hit the doorframe. "I'm leaving. I'm taking Eli, and I'm leaving." "Grandma, please." Eli reached for her, but she pulled away. "Don't touch me. I can't." Her words dissolved into something incoherent, fear and frustration mixing into a sound that was almost a wail. Nate set Mia down gently. "Lily, take your sister to your room." "But Daddy..." "Now, please." Lily grabbed Mia's hand and pulled her down the hallway. Nate heard the bedroom door close, and then it was just him and Eli and Evelyn, who was shaking again, pressing herself against the wall like she was cornered. "I don't know where I am," she whispered. "I don't know where I am, and I can't... Why can't I remember?" Nate moved slowly, carefully, the way you move around something frightened and fragile. "You're in Rockford. You're in my house. Your grandson is here with you." "My grandson." She looked at Eli, and for a second something shifted in her expression. "Eli?" "Yeah, Grandma, it's me." "You're so tall. When did you get so tall?" Eli's face crumpled with relief. "I'm not that tall." "You are." "You're..." She reached out, touched his face, and then the confusion rolled back in. "I need to make dinner. Your grandfather will be home soon. He doesn't like it when dinner's late." Grandpa died, remember? He died 2 years ago. Evelyn blinked, processing this information like it was new. He did? Yeah. Oh. She looked down at her hands. I forgot. The simplicity of it, the calm way she said it, was somehow worse than the panic. Nate saw Eli's shoulders shake, saw him trying not to break completely, and felt a surge of helplessness so intense it was almost physical. The phone rang. Nate grabbed it, saw an unknown number, answered without thinking. Hello? This is Grant Porter. Someone called me from this number about my mother? Yes. Yes, this is Nate Wilder. Your mom and your son are here at my house. He glanced at Evelyn, lowered his voice. They got lost in the rain. Your mom seems confused, disoriented. There was a long pause. Then, how confused? She doesn't recognize where she is, doesn't always recognize Eli. She's trying to remember things, and can't. Another pause, longer this time. When Grant spoke again, his voice was tight. I'm 40 minutes away. I'm leaving now. Please, just keep them there. Keep them safe. I will. Is she hurt? Did she fall? No, just cold and wet. We got her dry, gave her food. Thank you. The words came out rough. Thank you. The line went dead. Nate set the phone down and looked at Evelyn, who had sunk onto the couch again, her eyes closed. Eli sat beside her, not touching her, just sitting close enough to be there if she needed him. Your dad's on his way, Nate told him. Eli nodded without looking up. The rain had settled into a steady drumming rhythm, no longer violent but relentless, the kind of rain that could go all night. Nate checked the bucket in the hallway, 3/4 full now, and dumped it in the sink. When he came back, Evelyn's eyes were open again, fixed on something across the room. There's a hole in your ceiling, she said, her voice perfectly clear. Nate followed her gaze. There was indeed a water stain spreading across the plaster near the corner, brown and ugly. Yeah, it leaks when it rains, Mom. You should fix that. I should do a lot of things. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a moment she seemed completely present. You're very kind, she said, taking in strangers. Not everyone would do that. Anyone would do that. No. She shook her head slowly. No, they wouldn't. Most people would have walked past, would have closed the door. Nate didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Evelyn's eyes drifted closed again, and within minutes her breathing had evened out into sleep. Eli stayed beside her, watching her like he was afraid she'd disappear if he looked away. Why don't you lie down too? Nate suggested. You must be exhausted. I can't sleep. What if she wakes up and doesn't know where she is? Then I'll be here. I'll wake you. Eli hesitated, then shook his head. I should stay with her. Nate understood that. He went to the hallway closet, pulled out the sleeping bags the girls used for living room campouts, and spread them on the floor beside the couch. At least lie down. You can stay close. This time Eli agreed. He curled up in the sleeping bag, his eyes still on Evelyn, and within minutes he was asleep too. The kind of immediate, complete sleep that comes from emotional exhaustion. Nate stood in the middle of his living room, looking at the two people sleeping on his furniture, and tried to process what he'd just signed up for. He had 2 strangers in his house, one of them clearly sick, and $37 in his wallet. The rain showed no signs of stopping. The bucket would need emptying again soon. The girls were in their room, probably not sleeping, probably listening to all of this and trying to understand. He should have walked past them. He should have stayed inside, safe and separate, protecting what little he had. That would have been the smart thing to do, the reasonable thing. But Nate thought about Eli's face in the rain, about the way the boy had put himself between his grandmother and a stranger, about the terror and the trying to be brave. He thought about Evelyn's confusion, about the way she'd searched for memories that wouldn't come. He thought about how easy it would be to become those people, lost, wandering, hoping someone would open their door. He checked on the girls. They were in Lily's bed, both of them, Mia tucked against her sister's side. Neither was asleep. Is the boy okay? Lily whispered. He's sleeping. His dad is coming to get them. What's wrong with his grandma? I don't know, baby. Something that makes her confused. Is she going to die? The question hit Nate in the chest. I don't think so. I think she just needs help. Like we need help sometimes? Nate sat on the edge of the bed, running his hand over Lily's hair. Yeah, like that. Did you help them because nobody helps us? He looked at his daughter's face, at the too-old wisdom in her 8-year-old eyes, and felt something crack inside him. I helped them because it was the right thing to do. Even though we don't have enough? Even then, Mia stirred, her voice sleepy. You're a good daddy. Nate kissed them both, told them to try to sleep, and went back to the living room. He settled into the chair, watching Evelyn and Eli sleep, listening to the rain. The bucket would need emptying soon. The power would probably go out. Tomorrow would bring bills he still couldn't pay and problems he still couldn't solve. But tonight, right now, 2 people were safe and dry because he'd opened his door. That had to count for something. That had to matter. Evelyn stirred around midnight, her eyes opening with a start. She looked around, panic rising in her face, and Nate spoke quickly, gently. You're safe. You're at Nate's house. Your grandson is right there. Your son is coming. She stared at him, processing, and then slowly the tension left her shoulders. I forgot again. Didn't I? It's okay. It's not okay. Her voice was very quiet. It's getting worse. Your son will be here soon. Grant. She said the name like she was testing it. My son's name is Grant. That's right. She looked at Eli, sleeping in the bag beside the couch. And that's Eli, my grandson. Yes. I knew that before. I did. Sometimes it slips away and I can't get it back. Nate leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. How long has this been happening? Months. Little things at first, forgetting where I put my keys, missing appointments, then bigger things, getting lost driving home, calling Grant by his father's name. She paused. I went to a doctor. They did tests. Early stage Alzheimer's, they said. Early stage, like that makes it better. Does Grant know? Evelyn shook her head. I didn't tell him. He worries so much already, works himself half to death trying to keep everything together. I thought I could manage it. Her voice caught. I thought I had more time before it got this bad. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the rain continued its steady assault. I took Eli to the park today, Evelyn continued. I do that sometimes after school, give Grant a couple hours to work. We were having such a nice time, and then, I don't know, 1 minute I knew exactly where I was, and the next, she gestured helplessly. It was all gone. The street names, the direction home, everything. And Eli was looking at me like I was supposed to know what to do, and I couldn't remember. But you're okay now. For now. It comes and goes. Right now I'm here, I'm me. In an hour, I might not remember this conversation. I might not remember you. She looked at him steadily. Thank you. For helping us. For not... Anyone would have... Stop saying that. There was steel in her voice, lucid and sharp. Stop pretending this is normal, that kindness is common. Most people would have closed the door, would have called the police maybe, but wouldn't have brought us inside, wouldn't have fed us, wouldn't have sat here in the middle of the night making sure we were safe. You did that. You, specifically. Own it. Nate didn't know what to say to that either. Evelyn's eyes traveled around the room, taking in the water-stained ceiling, the duct-taped window, the worn furniture. You're not doing well yourself, are you? We're managing. That's what I said. Right up until I couldn't anymore. She paused. What happened? Maybe it was the late hour, or the strange intimacy of sitting in the dark with someone who might not remember the conversation tomorrow. Maybe it was just the relief of talking to someone who asked. Nate found himself telling her about the layoffs, about trying to make it work with online sales, about Lily's careful questions, and Mia's 2 old eyes, and the specific terror of being responsible for people you can't protect. Evelyn listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long time. My husband built a business from nothing, she finally said. Worked himself into an early grave doing it. Grant took it over when he was barely 25, and he's worked just as hard, trying to prove he could fill those shoes. I watch him running himself ragged, and I think, what's it all for? All that money, all that success, and he barely sees his own son. Barely sees me. She looked at Eli again. Then I see someone like you with nothing, giving away what little you have, and I think maybe we've got it backwards. I just did what anyone... There you go again. But she was smiling, just a little. You don't take compliments well. Haven't had much practice lately. They talked for another hour, Evelyn asking about the girls, about the work Nate did, about the life he was trying to build from scraps. She told him about Grant's company, about how it had grown from importing textiles to handling custom manufacturing contracts, about how her late husband would have been proud and terrified in equal measure. And then, mid-sentence, she stopped. Her eyes went distant. She looked around the room like she'd never seen it before. Who are you? Nate's stomach dropped. I'm Nate. We've been talking. We have? She sounded genuinely confused. I'm sorry, I don't remember. It's okay. You're safe. Your son is coming. My son. She repeated it, testing the words. Then her face crumpled. I can't remember his name. I should know my son's name, and I can't. Why can't I? It's Grant. His name is Grant. Grant. Relief flooded her face. Yes. Grant. Where is he? On his way. She nodded, still confused, but accepting this, and then her eyes fell on Eli. Who's that boy? That's your grandson, Eli. Eli, she whispered. Then, more urgently, is he okay? Is he safe? He's fine. He's sleeping. Good. That's good. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. I'm tired, so tired. You can rest. I'll keep watch. You're very kind. She said it like it was the first time, like they hadn't just spent an hour talking. What's your name? Nate. Nate. She smiled, her eyes already closing. That's a good name. She drifted off again, leaving Nate alone with the rain and the sleeping child on the floor, and the weight of understanding how fragile everything really was. He emptied the bucket twice more. He checked on the girls 3 times. He stayed awake as the hours crawled past, watching over people he'd known for less than a day, wondering what he'd gotten himself into, and knowing he'd do it again anyway. The rain finally broke around 4 in the morning, tapering off to a drizzle and then stopping completely. The silence felt strange after hours of steady drumming. Nate stood at the window, watching the street shine wet under the streetlights, and let himself feel the exhaustion he'd been holding off. He must have dozed in the chair, because the next thing he knew, there were headlights sweeping across the living room wall and the sound of a car door slamming. Nate stood, his back protesting, and moved to the window. A black SUV was parked at the curb, sleek and expensive-looking even in the pre-dawn dimness. A man was climbing out, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of controlled urgency that comes from holding panic at bay through sheer will. Nate opened the door before the man could knock. They looked at each other for a long moment. Nate, rumpled and exhausted in clothes he'd been wearing for 24 hours. And Grant Porter, sharp-dressed even at 4 in the morning, his face drawn with fear and something that looked like shame. They're inside, Nate said quietly. They're safe. Grant's shoulders sagged with relief so profound it was almost physical. Thank you. Thank you. He moved past Nate into the house, his eyes immediately finding Eli on the floor and Evelyn on the couch. He knelt beside his son, his hand hovering over the boy's shoulder like he was afraid to touch him, afraid he might disappear. Eli's eyes opened. He saw his father and burst into tears. Dad, I tried to call you, and Grandma got so confused and I didn't know what to do and... Shh, it's okay. I'm here now. Grant pulled him close and Nate turned away, giving them privacy for the reunion. When he turned back, Grant was standing, one arm still around Eli, looking at his mother. Evelyn was awake, watching them both with an expression Nate couldn't quite read. Mom, Grant said, and his voice broke on the word. Hello, sweetheart. She smiled at him, tired but present. I'm sorry I worried you. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you? He stopped, shaking his head. We'll talk about it later. Let's get you home. I can't go home. Evelyn's voice was firm. I don't remember where home is. The words landed like a punch. Grant's face went white, and Nate saw him struggling, saw him trying to hold it together in front of his son. Then you'll come to my house, Grant said finally. You'll stay with me. We'll figure this out. Will we? Evelyn looked at him steadily. Or will you hire someone to manage me while you go back to working 80-hour weeks? Mom, I'm not criticizing Grant. I'm tired of pretending. I'm sick. It's going to get worse. We need to deal with that. Grant stood there, his son tucked against his side, and Nate watched him realize that everything had changed, that the careful structure he'd built was crumbling and there was no fixing it, only adapting. Finally, Grant turned to Nate. How long have they been here? Since about 7 last night. And you took them in, fed them, stayed up all night. He looked around the room, really seeing it for the first time. Seeing the water stain, the duct-taped window, the threadbare furniture. You don't even know us. They needed help. Most people would have just called 911. Yeah. Nate thought about Evelyn saying the same thing. So I've been told. Grant was quiet for a moment, studying Nate with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. Then his eyes fell on the kitchen table, where Nate's latest project sat. A half-finished cutting board, the wood still raw, waiting for sanding. You made that? Yeah, I sell them online. Small stuff, nothing special. Grant moved closer, running his hand over the wood. This is beautiful work. The grain, the joinery, this is professional-level craftsmanship. I used to work in a furniture workshop before the layoffs. Fletcher Manufacturing? Nate blinked, surprised. Yeah, how did you... I know the owner. We used to do business together. Grant was still examining the cutting board, turning it over in his hands. This is custom work. High-end. You're selling it online. Trying to. It's slow. Hard to compete with mass-produced stuff. You're competing in the wrong market. Grant set the board down carefully. This quality needs to be in specialty stores, kitchen boutiques, high-end gift shops. You need distribution, marketing, someone who knows how to position artisan goods. Nate felt something twist in his chest, hope and skepticism tangled together. Yeah, well, I don't have money for any of that. Grant looked at him for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, and looked up. What if someone else did? What? I run an import business. We handle custom manufacturing, specialty goods, distribution networks across the country. What you do, it's exactly the kind of product our clients are looking for. Handcrafted, high quality, with a story behind it. Nate stared at him. You're not serious. I'm completely serious. You saved my family tonight. You gave them shelter when you could barely afford to feed your own kids. The least I can do... He stopped, shook his head. No, not the least. What I want to do is make sure you never have to make that choice again. Make sure nobody does. The words hung in the air between them. Eli was watching his father with wide eyes. Evelyn was smiling, that sharp, present smile that meant she was tracking every word. I can't just... Nate struggled to find words. I have 2 daughters. I can't take a risk on something that might not work. It'll work. Grant's voice was absolutely certain. With the right backing, the right distribution, this will work. I'll put it in writing. A contract, guaranteed income while we build the brand, then profit sharing once we're established. Why would you do that? Grant looked at his mother, at his son, at the cheap couch where they'd slept safe through the storm. Because someone needs to. Because kindness should matter. Because... His voice roughened. Because I've been so focused on building an empire that I almost lost the people who make it mean something. And you, with nothing, remembered what I forgot. Nate felt the girls before he saw them, Lily and Mia, standing in the hallway in their pajamas, watching everything with sleepy, hopeful eyes. Is that man going to help us, Daddy? Mia asked. And Nate looked at Grant Porter, at his expensive clothes and his exhausted face, and his son holding his hand, and thought about doors opening and closing, about storms that pass and ones that don't, about the math that never works until suddenly it does. Yeah, baby, he said, his voice thick. I think maybe he is. The morning came slow and gray, the kind of dawn that felt more like an ending than a beginning. Nate stood in his kitchen making coffee with grounds he'd already used twice, watching Grant Porter load his mother and son into that sleek black SUV, and tried to believe that the conversation from an hour ago had actually happened. Grant had written his number on the back of a business card, pressed it into Nate's hand with a firmness that felt like a promise. "I'll call you Monday. We'll set up a meeting, go over the details. This is real, Nate. I meant every word." Now the SUV pulled away from the curb, Eli's face visible in the back window, one hand raised in a small wave. Nate lifted his own hand in response, held it there until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Lily appeared at his elbow, still in her pajamas, her hair a mess of tangles. "Did that really happen?" "I think so. Is he really going to help us?" Nate looked down at his daughter, at the careful hope in her eyes, and felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. "He said he would. But people say things." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, older than 8. "They say things, and then they don't do them." She was talking about her mother, about the promises that had dissolved like sugar in water, sweet and then gone. Nate knelt down, eye level with her. "Some people do that," he said carefully, "but some people keep their word. We're going to believe Mr. Porter is the second kind until he shows us otherwise, okay?" Lily nodded, but her eyes stayed skeptical. She'd learned that lesson too young, learned to protect herself from disappointment by expecting it. Nate hated that she had to carry that weight, hated that he couldn't promise her anything with certainty. Mia wandered in, dragging her stuffed rabbit by one ear. "Is breakfast spaghetti?" "No, baby, we're out of spaghetti. What do we have?" Nate opened the cupboard, took inventory. 2 eggs, half a loaf of bread, peanut butter. He could make that work for one more day. After that, he stopped himself. After that was Monday, and Monday was when Grant said he'd call, and Nate was going to hold on to that like a lifeline because the alternative was drowning. "French toast," he announced. "Special Sunday breakfast." The girls' faces lit up. French toast meant eggs and cinnamon, meant something that felt like celebration even when there was nothing to celebrate. Nate mixed the eggs with water to stretch them, soaked the bread, cooked it in the pan until it was golden. No syrup, they'd run out weeks ago, but he sprinkled cinnamon sugar on top and the girls ate like it was a feast. "This is really good, Daddy," Lily said, and Mia nodded with her mouth full, and Nate felt that familiar ache of love and inadequacy tangled together. After breakfast, he tried to work. He had 2 cutting board orders pending, needed to sand and finish them before the week started, but his hands felt clumsy and his mind kept wandering. He kept thinking about Grant's words, professional-level craftsmanship, high-end market, distribution networks. He kept thinking about the way Grant had examined his work, the assessment in his eyes that had looked like recognition rather than pity. He kept thinking about Evelyn, about the confusion that had rolled over her in waves, about the terror in her face when she couldn't remember her own son's name. He kept thinking about Eli, about the way the boy had tried so hard to be brave, to take care of his grandmother when he was barely old enough to take care of himself. "Daddy?" Lily was at the table, her homework spread out in front of her. "Can you help me with this math problem?" Nate set down the sandpaper, moved to look over her shoulder. Division with remainders. He walked her through it, watching her face as understanding clicked into place, and felt a surge of gratitude that at least this, helping his daughter with homework on a Sunday afternoon, this he could still do. The day crawled past. Nate finished 1 cutting board, started on the second. The girls played quietly, that particular kind of quiet that comes from children who've learned not to ask for things. Around 3, Lily looked up from her coloring. "Can we go to the park?" Nate thought about the park, about the walk there and back, about how the girls would see other kids with snacks and toys and parents who weren't counting every penny. "It's pretty cold out." "We don't mind cold." "I know, baby, but maybe another day." Lily's face fell for just a second before she smoothed it over, went back to her coloring. That small moment of disappointment, quickly hidden, it gutted him. His daughters shouldn't have to hide their disappointment. They shouldn't have to make themselves smaller to fit into the life he could provide. He stood abruptly. "You know what? Get your coats. We're going to the park." Their faces transformed, joy replacing resignation so fast it made his chest hurt. They scrambled for their jackets, their shoes, and 5 minutes later they were walking down the sidewalk hand in hand, Lily on one side, Mia on the other. The park was nearly empty, the cold keeping most families inside. Nate sat on a bench while the girls ran for the swings, their laughter cutting through the gray afternoon like light. He watched them pump their legs, reaching for height, and tried to calculate how many more days like this they had before the math finally stopped working altogether. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Grant Porter. Just wanted to confirm. Monday, 10 a.m. at my office? I'll send you the address. We'll go over everything." Nate stared at the message, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. He typed back, "I'll be there." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Thank you for everything you did last night. I can't..." There aren't words for what that meant. Nate didn't know how to respond to that, so he just wrote, "Says. How's your mom?" "Sleeping. Doctor's coming tomorrow to do a full assessment. Eli won't leave her side. He's a good kid. He is. Because of people like you." Nate pocketed his phone, uncomfortable with the gratitude, with the weight of being seen as someone who mattered. He was just a guy who'd opened his door. Anyone would have done that. Except Evelyn's voice echoed in his head. No, they wouldn't. Most people would have walked past. "Daddy, watch!" Mia was hanging upside down from the monkey bars, her face red with the effort, her smile huge. "Look how long I can hang." "I see you, baby. That's amazing." He watched his daughters play until the cold started biting through their thin jackets, until Mia's lips had a blue tinge and Lily was shivering. Then he called them over and they walked home, the girls chattering about the park, about school tomorrow, about nothing and everything. That night, after they were asleep, Nate sat at the kitchen table and let himself think about Monday. Let himself imagine walking into Grant Porter's office, signing papers, shaking hands on something real. Let himself imagine a future where he wasn't always scrambling, always one emergency away from collapse. Then he made himself stop. Hope was dangerous when you couldn't afford to be disappointed. Better to stay practical, stay grounded, expect nothing, and be grateful for whatever came. But as he lay in bed that night, listening to the house settle around him, he couldn't quite kill the small flame of possibility that had sparked in his chest. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Nate woke up 2 hours early, unable to sleep, and used the time to shower in lukewarm water and dig out his one good shirt from the back of the closet. It was wrinkled, a little tight across the shoulders, but it was the closest thing he had to professional. He made breakfast for the girls, toast with peanut butter, the last of the bread, and walked them to school. Lily kept looking at him, taking in the pressed shirt, the attempt at looking put together. "Is this about the man from Saturday?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm meeting with him this morning." "Are you nervous?" "A little." She squeezed his hand. "You'll do good, Daddy. You're really smart." The simple faith in her voice nearly undid him. He kissed the top of her head, watched her and Mia disappear into the school building, then headed for the bus stop. The address Grant had sent was downtown, in one of the newer buildings that had gone up during Rockford's brief economic boom before the recession hit. Nate stood outside for a full minute, looking up at the glass and steel facade, trying to convince himself he belonged here. The lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of space designed to make you feel small. Nate gave his name to the receptionist, a woman in a sleek blazer who looked at his wrinkled shirt with barely concealed assessment, and was directed to the elevators. 7th floor. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with frosted glass and tasteful lighting. Porter Import Solutions was etched into the glass at the far end. Nate pushed through the door and found himself in a reception area that was somehow both minimalist and expensive. "Nate Wilder?" The receptionist here was friendlier, her smile genuine. "Mr. Porter's expecting you. Right this way." She led him down another corridor, knocked once on a heavy wooden door, then pushed it open. Grant's office was large but not ostentatious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Rockford. Grant stood when Nate entered, coming around the desk with his hand extended. "Nate, thank you for coming." His grip was firm, his eyes direct. He looked better than he had Saturday night, cleaner, more composed, but there was still exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. How's your mom? Nate asked. Grant's expression flickered. Not great. The doctor confirmed what we suspected. Alzheimer's, progressing faster than we'd like. We're setting up home care, adjusting schedules. He paused. Eli's struggling. He keeps asking why she doesn't remember him. That's hard, for everyone. Yeah. Grant gestured to a chair. Please sit. Can I get you coffee? Water? I'm fine. They settled on opposite sides of a small conference table by the window. Grant pulled out a folder, opened it to reveal what looked like contracts and spreadsheets. I spent yesterday putting together a proposal, he said. I want to be completely transparent about what I'm offering and what I'm asking in return. Nate leaned forward, his heart hammering. First, the basics. I'd like to contract you to produce high-end wooden goods, cutting boards, serving platters, utensil sets, whatever you can make at the quality level I saw Saturday night. I'll provide the materials, the workshop space, the tools you need. You provide the craftsmanship. Workshop space? We have a warehouse on the north side. Part of it's empty. We can convert it into a proper woodworking shop, climate-controlled, professional equipment, everything you need. Nate tried to process this. And you'd pay me hourly to start while we build inventory. $50 an hour, 40 hours a week, with benefits after 90 days. The number hit Nate like a physical thing. $50 an hour. That was, he did the math automatically, $2,000 a week, $8,000 a month. More than he'd made at Fletcher, more than he'd made anywhere. That's too much, he heard himself say. Grant shook his head. That's what skilled craftsmen make. What you should have been making all along. He pulled out another sheet. Once we have inventory built up, we transition to a profit-sharing model. I handle distribution, marketing, sales. You handle production. We split profits 60-40. 60-40 in your favor? 60 in yours. You're doing the skilled work. I'm just moving product. Nate stared at him. Why are you doing this? Grant was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the city below. When my father died, he left me this company and about 10 minutes of advice. He said, take care of people and profit takes care of itself. I forgot that. I got caught up in margins and growth and proving I could fill his shoes, and I forgot the first part. He looked back at Nate. You didn't forget. You took care of people when you had every reason not to, when it cost you. That's worth more than any business degree. I did what anyone... Stop. Grant's voice was firm, but not unkind. Evelyn told me about your conversation. She said you keep diminishing what you did, like kindness is nothing special. But it is special, Nate. It's rare. And it's exactly the kind of foundation I want to build a business on. Nate didn't know what to say to that. He looked down at the contract, at the numbers that represented a future he'd stopped letting himself imagine. There's one more thing, Grant continued. This isn't just about you. I want to build something bigger, a cooperative. We start with you, get the operation running, then we bring in other people who need work. Laid-off workers, seniors looking for part-time income, single parents who need flexible schedules. We train them, pay them fairly, give them a stake in what we're building. A cooperative. Yeah, people investing in each other, like you invested in my family Saturday night. Nate felt his throat tighten. I don't know the first thing about running a cooperative. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Grant slid the contract across the table. Look, I know this is a lot. Take the contract home, read through it, have a lawyer look at it if you want. But Nate, I'm serious about this. I want to do this. Nate picked up the papers, his hands not quite steady. The words swam on the page. Salary, benefits, profit sharing, workshop specifications. It was real. Actual legal documents making actual promises. When would I start? He asked. Whenever you're ready. This week if you want. I have 2 cutting board orders I need to finish. Finish them here, in the workshop. Consider it a trial run. Nate looked up, met Grant's eyes. He saw sincerity there and determination and something that looked like hope. He thought about Lily asking if breakfast was spaghetti. He thought about Mia arranging her crayons by size because it was the only thing she could control. He thought about the bucket in the hallway and the duct-taped window and the specific terror of not being enough. Okay, he said. Yes, I'll do it. Grant's face broke into a smile, genuine and relieved. Yeah? Yeah. They shook hands across the table, and Nate felt something shift in his chest, some weight he'd been carrying for months starting to ease. I'll have my assistant draw up the formal paperwork, Grant said. We can sign by end of week. In the meantime, let me show you the workshop space. They took Grant's car, that same black SUV from Saturday night, across town to a warehouse district Nate knew vaguely from his Fletcher days. Grant pulled up to a long, low building with Porter Import Solutions stenciled on the side. Inside was vast and echoing, half filled with pallets and shipping containers. Grant led him to the far end where an empty section waited, clean and bright under industrial lighting. This is about 3,000 square feet, Grant said. Plenty of room for workbenches, tool storage, finishing area. We'll need to bring in equipment, table saw, planer, drill press, whatever you need. Make me a list. Nate walked the space slowly, his footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. He could see it. Workbenches along the walls, lumber racks in the corner, a finishing booth for staining and sealing. He could see other people here too, bent over their own projects, building things with their hands, taking home paychecks that mattered. It's perfect, he said quietly. Good. Grant checked his phone. I have a meeting in an hour, but why don't you stay? Get a feel for the space. Think about what you'll need. I'll have keys made for you by tomorrow. Grant. Nate turned to face him. I don't know how to thank you for this. You already did, Saturday night. Everything after this is just me trying to catch up. After Grant left, Nate stood alone in the empty workshop space and let himself feel it. The possibility, the potential, the terrifying hope that maybe, finally, things were going to be okay. He pulled out his phone, took pictures of the space, measurements scribbled in a notes app. He made a mental list of tools, of materials, of all the things he could build if he just had the resources. Then he sat down on the concrete floor, his back against the wall, and let the tears come. Relief and gratitude and exhaustion all mixed together, pouring out in shaking sobs he'd been holding back for months. He cried for the nights he'd gone to bed hungry, so the girls could eat. For the terror of every unexpected bill. For the shame of not being enough. For all of it. When he was done, wrung out and empty, he stood up and wiped his face and headed for the bus stop. He had daughters to pick up from school. He had a contract to read. He had a future to start believing in. Lily and Mia knew something had changed the moment he met them at the school gate. Maybe it was the way he was smiling, or the lightness in his step, or the fact that he swept them both up in a hug that lifted them off the ground. What happened? Lily demanded when he set them down. Did you get the job? I got the job. And more than that, He struggled to find words that would make sense to an 8-year-old. I got a chance to build something real. Does that mean we can get groceries? Mia asked, practical as always. Nate laughed, the sound surprising him. Yeah, baby, we can get groceries. They went to the store that afternoon, and Nate let the girls pick things they wanted. Cereal that wasn't the cheapest brand. Fresh fruit, chicken for dinner. He watched the total climb at the register and felt only the smallest flutter of anxiety, because he had a contract in his bag that promised $50 an hour, 40 hours a week. Benefits after 90 days. At home, he made dinner, real dinner, with protein and vegetables and the kind of care he hadn't been able to afford in months. The girls ate like they were starving, and maybe they had been, in small ways, in ways Nate hadn't wanted to acknowledge. After dinner, after baths and stories and tucking them into bed, Nate sat at the kitchen table and read through the contract Grant had given him. Every word, every clause, looking for the catch, the hidden cost, the thing that would make this too good to be true. But it was straightforward, fair, more than fair. Grant had built in protections for Nate, guarantees about hours and pay and conditions. The profit-sharing model was weighted in Nate's favor. The cooperative structure included provisions for training new workers, for flexible schedules, for building something sustainable. It was real. It was happening. Nate pulled out his phone, stared at Grant's number, then typed out a message. Read the contract. It's more than generous. Thank you. The reply came within minutes. You earned it. See you tomorrow? Tomorrow. That night, Nate slept better than he had in months. No nightmares about eviction notices or empty cupboards. No jolting awake at 3 a.m. to calculate and recalculate bills. Just deep, dreamless sleep the kind that comes from knowing tomorrow might actually be better than today. He woke to his alarm instead of anxiety, made breakfast with food they actually had, walked the girls to school with a lightness he'd forgotten was possible. Then he headed downtown, back to that gleaming building, back to Grant's office. The next week blurred past in a rush of activity. Grant's assistant, a sharp woman named Rachel, who seemed to run the entire operation with terrifying efficiency, helped Nate set up payroll, insurance, tax documents. Grant took him to meet with a contractor about converting the warehouse space. Together they made lists of equipment, got quotes, placed orders. Nate felt like he was learning a new language, profit margins, and vendor relations, and market positioning. Grant was patient, explaining everything, including Nate in decisions about the business they were building together. "This is as much yours as mine," Grant kept saying. "I need you to feel ownership of it." On Wednesday, Evelyn came to the office. She moved slowly, one hand on Eli's shoulder for balance, and when she saw Nate, her face lit up with recognition. "The kind man from the storm," she said. "I remember you." "How are you feeling, Evelyn?" "Tired, confused some days, but better knowing Eli's taken care of." She looked around the office at the plans spread across Grant's desk. "What are you boys building?" Grant explained the cooperative, the vision for it, and Evelyn listened with sharp attention. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "My husband would have loved this," she finally said. "He always said business should lift people up, not grind them down." She looked at Nate. "You gave my family shelter when we needed it. Now Grant's giving you the same. That's how it should work. That's how community works." "I'd like you to be part of it," Grant said, "if you're up for it. Maybe help with design, sourcing, things that don't require—" He hesitated. "Things that don't require me to remember what I had for breakfast?" Evelyn's smile was wry. "I'd like that. Give me something useful to do while I still can." The equipment started arriving Thursday. Industrial table saw, planer, jointer, drill press. Nate spent hours uncrating it, setting it up, calibrating everything to perfect precision. He built his first cutting board in the new workshop Friday afternoon, and when he ran his hands over the finished piece, smooth and perfect, the wood grain singing, he felt something settle in his chest. This was real. This was happening. This was his. Grant stopped by as Nate was cleaning up, Eli trailing behind him. "Can I see?" Eli asked shyly. Nate handed him the cutting board. The boy turned it over carefully, his fingers tracing the wood grain. "It's beautiful," Eli said. "You made this?" "I did." "Could you teach me how to make things?" Nate glanced at Grant, who nodded. "I'd like that," Nate said. "Maybe you can come by on Saturdays, learn some basics." Eli's face transformed with joy, and Nate felt an echo of that Saturday night, of choosing to help even when it cost him, of opening the door to people who needed shelter from the storm. The weekend brought the first real test. Nate brought Lily and Mia to the workshop, let them see where their father would be working. They ran through the space with wide eyes, asking 1,000 questions, touching everything. "This is where you'll work every day?" Lily asked. "Every day. And you'll get paid enough to buy groceries and pay the electric bill and everything?" "Yeah, baby, everything." She looked up at him with those two old eyes, and he saw the hope there fighting with fear of disappointment. "Promise?" Nate knelt down, pulled both girls close. "I promise. Things are going to be better now." Mia tucked her head against his shoulder. "I'm glad you helped that boy and his grandma, even though we didn't have enough." "Me too, baby. Me too." That evening, Grant invited them to dinner at his house, a sprawling place on the nice side of town with a yard big enough to get lost in. Eli gave Lily and Mia a tour while the adults talked in the kitchen, and Nate watched his daughters run through rooms 3 times the size of their entire house and felt the complicated tangle of gratitude and inadequacy. "They'll have this too someday," Grant said quietly, following his gaze. "What we're building, it's going to create opportunity for a lot of families." "How many people are you thinking of hiring?" "As many as we can support. I'm thinking we start with 5, see how it goes, scale up from there. You'll need to help interview, find people with the right skills or the willingness to learn." Nate thought about the men and women he'd worked with at Fletcher, about the families that had been torn apart by those layoffs. I know some people who might be interested. Good. Reach out to them. Let's start building. They ate dinner together, all of them, Evelyn included. She had good moments and bad moments, periods of clarity followed by confusion, but Eli stayed close, patient, and gentle with her in a way that made Nate's heart ache. This little boy had learned too young how to take care of someone, just like Lily had learned too young how to count and ration and protect her hope. After dinner, Evelyn pulled Nate aside. She was having one of her clear moments, her eyes sharp and present. "Thank you," she said simply, "for giving my son something to believe in again. He's been lost since his father died, trying to prove himself through work. What you're building together, it's giving him purpose beyond profit. He's the one helping me." "You're helping each other. That's rarer than you think." She paused. "I won't be here to see how this turns out. This disease, I know how it ends, but I'm glad I got to see the beginning. Glad I got to see what kindness can build." Nate didn't know what to say to that, so he just took her hand and held it. The next week, they started hiring. Grant put out word through his business networks. Nate reached out to former Fletcher employees. They interviewed 12 people, hired 5, 3 men and 2 women, all of them laid off within the last year, all of them desperate for steady work. Nate trained them personally, teaching them how to read wood grain, how to handle the tools, how to build something that would last. He watched them gain confidence, watched their shoulders straighten as they realized they could do this. They could create value with their hands. One of them, Marcus, had 3 kids at home and had been unemployed for 8 months. On his 3rd day, he pulled Nate aside. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said, his voice rough. "When I got this job, when you said $50 an hour with benefits, I thought it was a scam. I thought nobody paid that for honest work anymore. It's not a scam. I know that now, and thank you," my wife cried when I told her. We'd been talking about moving in with her parents, about giving up our place. This job, it saved us. Nate thought about Saturday night, about opening the door in the storm, about the chain reaction that had started with one small choice. "You're going to save someone else too," he said. "That's how this works. We take care of each other." By the end of the 2nd week, they had inventory built up. 20 cutting boards, a dozen serving platters, custom utensil sets. Grant sent samples to boutique retailers, to specialty kitchen stores, to high-end gift shops across the region. The response was immediate. Orders started coming in. Not huge, not overwhelming, but steady, real. "This is going to work," Grant said, looking at the order forms spread across his desk. "This is actually going to work." Nate felt it too. That shift from possibility to reality, from hope to certainty. They were building something real, something sustainable, something that mattered. The 3rd week brought challenges. One of the new hires quit, overwhelmed by the learning curve. A shipment of lumber came in warped and unusable. Evelyn had a bad episode, got lost in her own house, and Grant had to leave work early to help Eli calm her down. But they pushed through. Nate worked longer hours, training the remaining workers, troubleshooting problems, ensuring quality stayed high. Grant handled the business side, building relationships with retailers, managing cash flow, planning for growth. And slowly, steadily, the cooperative started to take shape. Not just a workshop, but a community. The workers started eating lunch together, sharing stories, looking out for each other. When Marcus's kid got sick, the others covered his shifts without being asked. When one of the women, Sarah, mentioned she was struggling with childcare, they adjusted the schedule to give her flexibility. It was what Grant had envisioned, people investing in each other, building something bigger than individual profit. 1 month in, Nate got his first real paycheck. He stared at the number, 2 weeks of work at $50 an hour, and felt dizzy. It was more money than he'd seen at once in months, maybe ever. He took the girls shopping that weekend. Not just groceries, but clothes that fit, shoes that weren't worn through. They went to a restaurant, a real one, and ordered whatever they wanted. Lily got a burger with fries. Mia got chicken fingers and ate every single one, her face glowing with contentment. "Is this how it's going to be now?" Lily asked, careful hope in her voice. "Yeah," Nate said, and meant it. "This is how it's going to be." That night, he paid bills. All of them. Rent in full with money left over. Electric, water, internet he'd been scraping by without. He paid the minimum on his credit card debt and started a savings account with what remained. For the first time in months, he went to bed without the crushing weight of financial terror pressing down on his chest. The cooperative kept growing. By week 6, they'd hired 2 more people. By week 8, they had standing orders from 15 retailers across 3 states. By week 10, Grant was talking about expanding the warehouse space, about bringing in more equipment, about scaling up production. "We need to think about structure," Grant said one afternoon, spreading papers across the workshop table. "Right now it's just you and me and handshake agreements. We need to formalize the cooperative, set up profit sharing, create a real framework." They brought in a lawyer who specialized in cooperative businesses. She helped them draft bylaws, create a governance structure, establish the mechanisms for workers to gain ownership stakes. It was complicated and sometimes overwhelming, but Nate learned as he went, asking questions, making sure he understood every clause. "You're good at this," the lawyer told him after one particularly long session. "Most craftspeople don't have the head for business, but you're seeing the big picture." Nate thought about all those months of calculating and recalculating, of making $37 stretch, of the math that never worked. "I learned by necessity," he said. 3 months in, they held their first official cooperative meeting. All the workers gathered in the workshop after hours, and Grant laid out the vision: shared ownership, democratic decision-making, profits distributed based on hours worked and seniority. "This isn't my company anymore," Grant said. "It's ours. All of ours. We build this together, we succeed together. We share in that success together." They voted on the bylaws, unanimously approved. They elected a workers' council, Nate, Marcus, and Sarah. They set up mechanisms for hiring, for conflict resolution, for ensuring everyone had a voice. Walking home that night, Nate felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, not just stability, but pride. He was part of something meaningful, something that was changing lives, including his own. The girls noticed the change in him. He smiled more, laughed more, came home from work energized instead of exhausted. They started making plans, small ones at first, then bigger. Maybe they could move to a better house. Maybe they could get a dog. Maybe. 4 months in, on a cold December afternoon, Evelyn came to the workshop. She was having a good day, her eyes clear and present. Grant had brought her to see what they'd built. She walked through slowly, taking in the workbenches, the tools, the workers bent over their projects. She stopped to talk to each person, asking about their work, their families, their lives. Then she found Nate at his station, where he was putting the final touches on a custom serving platter. "This is beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "You're building beautiful things. We all are." "No." She looked around the workshop, at the people working together, at the community they'd created. "I mean all of this. You're building something beautiful, something that's going to outlast all of us." She pulled him into a hug, and Nate felt her trembling slightly. "I won't remember this tomorrow," she whispered, "but right now, in this moment, I want you to know what you did that night in the storm, opening your door when you had every reason to keep it closed. That changed everything for all of us. You'd do the same. Maybe, maybe not, but you did, and that matters." She stepped back, smiled at him, then moved on to examine someone else's work. Nate watched her go and thought about doors and storms and the small choices that cascade into futures you could never have predicted. That night, Grant called him. "I need to tell you something. Mom's moving into full-time care next week. She's declining faster than we'd hoped." "I'm sorry." "Me too. But she's been talking about the cooperative, about what we're building. She says it gives her peace, knowing something good came from that night, knowing Eli got to see kindness in action." "How's Eli handling it?" "He's struggling, but he comes to the workshop on Saturdays, works beside you, and it helps. Gives him something solid to hold on to." After they hung up, Nate thought about Eli, about the scared little boy in the rain who'd tried so hard to take care of his grandmother, about how he'd grown over these months, learning to build things with his hands, finding stability in the rhythm of work. They were all healing, Nate realized, all of them, him and his daughters, Grant and Eli, the workers who'd thought they'd never find steady employment again. The cooperative wasn't just building furniture, it was building futures, building hope. And it had all started with one choice on one rainy night: to open the door instead of keeping it closed, to help instead of protecting scarcity, to believe that kindness could matter even when you had nothing left to give. Nate looked around his small rental house. Still modest, still imperfect, but warm and safe and full. He thought about the workshop, about the community they were building, about all the lives intersecting and supporting each other. The storm had passed, the door had opened, and everything after that was just people taking care of people, building something beautiful, from the simple foundation of choosing to help when help was needed most. The January cold hit Rockford like a fist, temperatures plunging below zero for days at a time, and Nate found himself grateful for the warehouse's industrial heating system. He stood at his workbench on a Tuesday morning, watching frost patterns spread across the high windows, and tried not to think about what this winter would have been like in that drafty rental house with an electric bill he couldn't pay. Marcus came in stamping snow off his boots, his face red from the cold. "Pipes froze at my place last night. Had to thaw them with a hairdryer at 5 in the morning. You need help with that?" Nate asked. "We could run by after work, winterize things properly." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." That was how it worked now, Nate had learned. The cooperative wasn't just about building furniture together. It was about showing up for each other in the small ways that mattered. Last week when Sarah's car died, 3 of them had pooled money to help with the repair. When one of the newer hires, James, mentioned his kid needed winter boots, someone had shown up the next day with a pair that their own child had outgrown. It was community in the most basic sense, people taking care of people because that's what you did when you stopped seeing everyone as competition for scarce resources and started seeing them as partners in survival. Grant arrived mid-morning, Eli trailing behind him. The boy had shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there a month ago. Evelyn had moved into the memory care facility 2 weeks earlier, and the transition had been brutal for all of them. "Can Eli work with you today?" Grant asked Nate quietly. "He's having a hard time. School's on break, and he doesn't want to sit in the office." "Of course." Nate looked at Eli, who was staring at his shoes. "Hey, buddy. Want to help me with something special?" Eli nodded without speaking. Grant squeezed his son's shoulder, mouthed "thank you" at Nate, and headed to his office. Nate set Eli up at a workbench with a simple project, sanding a cutting board blank, getting it ready for finishing. The work was meditative, repetitive, the kind of thing that could quiet a noisy mind. Eli bent to the task with intense focus, his small hands moving in careful circles. They worked in silence for a while, just the whisper of sandpaper on wood and the distant sounds of the other workers. Then Eli spoke, his voice very small. "She didn't know who I was yesterday." Nate's hand stilled on his own project. "I'm sorry. Dad tried to tell her and she just got confused, started crying, said she didn't understand what was happening." Eli's voice cracked. "I tried to help, but I just made it worse. It's not your fault." "I know. Dad keeps saying that, but it feels like I should be able to fix it somehow. Like if I just tried hard enough or said the right things." "There's no right thing to say. Sometimes things are just broken, and you can't fix them. You can only be there." Eli was quiet for a long moment, his hands moving mechanically over the wood. "How do you do that? Just be there when it hurts so much." Nate thought about his own daughters, about all the nights he'd tucked them in knowing they'd gone to bed a little bit hungry, knowing he couldn't give them what they needed, about how being there had been the only thing he could offer. "You do it because the alternative is worse," he said finally. "Because leaving them alone with it, that's the thing you can't do. So you stay, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Eli nodded, still not looking up. They went back to work, the silence now comfortable instead of heavy, and Nate felt the weight of it, this boy's trust, his grief, his need for someone to tell him it was okay to hurt and still keep going. Around lunchtime, Sarah called everyone together. She had a proposal, she said, something the Workers' Council had been discussing. "We're doing well," she started, looking around at the assembled group. "Orders are steady, we're all making decent money, the cooperative is stable, but we're still just producing for other people's stores. What if we opened our own retail space?" The room went quiet. Marcus spoke first. That's a big investment. We'd need a storefront, inventory, someone to staff it. We'd need capital, James added, more than we have in the reserve fund. I know. Sarah pulled out a folder, spread papers on the workbench. But look at our margins. We're selling to retailers at wholesale. They're marking up 60 to 70%. If we sold direct, even after retail costs, we'd be making significantly more per piece. Nate studied the numbers. She was right. The math worked, barely, if they were careful and smart and a little bit lucky. It's risky, he said slowly. If it doesn't work, we could lose everything we've built. If we don't take risks, we stay small forever, Sarah countered. I didn't come here to stay small. I came here to build something. Grant had been listening from the doorway. Now he stepped forward. Can I offer a perspective? Everyone turned to look at him. He'd been careful over the past months to step back, to let the cooperative make its own decisions, to honor the democratic structure they'd created. But he was still the one with business experience, and they all knew it. Opening a retail space is the right move, he said. But the timing matters. We're 4 months old. We're still finding our footing. I'd suggest we wait 6 months, build our reserve fund, get through a full year of operations, then revisit this with more data and more capital. 6 months means we miss the spring market, Sarah argued. We miss Mother's Day, Father's Day, graduation season. Those are our best retail months. And 6 months means we don't crash and burn because we overextended, Grant replied, his tone gentle but firm. I know you want to grow. I want that too, but sustainable growth requires patience. The debate went on for another hour. Voices were raised, numbers were recalculated, scenarios were mapped out. In the end, they put it to a vote. The decision was split, 4 in favor of waiting, 3 in favor of moving forward now. Nate, as head of the Workers' Council, cast the deciding vote. He looked at Sarah's eager face, at the hope there, at the same impatience he'd felt when Grant had first offered him this opportunity. Then he looked at the cooperative they'd built, at the stability that was still so new and fragile. We wait, he said quietly. 6 months. We build our foundation stronger, then we grow. Sarah's face fell, but she nodded. Okay, but in 6 months we do this. We commit to it now. Agreed. The meeting broke up, workers returning to their stations. Grant pulled Nate aside, his expression thoughtful. That was the right call, he said. But it wasn't easy. No. Sarah's frustrated. She's going to push back. I know. Nate rubbed his face, suddenly tired. Part of me wants to just say yes, make everyone happy, but I keep thinking about, if this fails, we all go back to where we were. And I can't do that to my kids again. Can't put them through that uncertainty. You're leading from experience. That's valuable. Grant paused. But you need to keep Sarah engaged. She's talented, ambitious. If she feels held back, she'll leave. So what do I do? Give her a project, something that keeps her invested while we build toward the retail space. Let her research locations, draft business plans, prepare us for when we're ready. It was good advice. Nate found Sarah later that afternoon, made the suggestion. Her face brightened immediately. I can do that. I'll put together a full proposal, location analysis, build-out costs, staffing needs, projected revenues. Take your time. Be thorough. When we're ready to move, I want us to move smart. She threw herself into the project with the same intensity she brought to everything. Within a week, she had spreadsheets and location scouting reports. Within 2 weeks, she'd visited a dozen potential storefronts, negotiated preliminary rental terms, mapped out customer demographics. Watching her work, Nate felt a mixture of admiration and unease. She was driven in a way that reminded him of Grant, focused on growth, on building something bigger, on proving what was possible. It was good for the cooperative, but it also felt dangerous, like standing too close to something that burned too hot. The winter deepened. Evelyn's condition deteriorated steadily. Grant brought Eli to the workshop more and more often, sometimes staying himself, working on invoices and contracts at a makeshift desk in the corner. Nate understood why. The office felt empty now. The house felt emptier, and the workshop was full of people and purpose, and the sound of creation. One afternoon in late January, Grant looked up from his laptop and called Nate over. I need to show you something. He turned the screen so Nate could see. It was an email from a buyer for a national retail chain, not a boutique store, but a real chain, hundreds of locations across the country. They want to carry our products, Grant said, his voice carefully neutral. They saw our work at a trade show, loved the quality, want to discuss a contract. Nate read the email once, then again. This is huge. It's massive. Could triple our revenue overnight, but Grant hesitated. It would require scaling up production significantly. We'd need to hire more workers, bring in more equipment, potentially expand to a second shift. That's good, isn't it? More jobs, more income for everyone? In theory, in practice, it changes everything. We'd be producing at volume, which means less customization, more standardization. Quality could suffer if we're not careful, and we'd be dependent on one major buyer, which makes us vulnerable. Nate sat down, processing this. What do you think we should do? I think we bring it to the cooperative. This isn't my decision anymore. It affects everyone. They called a meeting that evening, after regular hours. Grant laid out the opportunity, the risks, the implications. The room erupted in debate. This is exactly what we need, Sarah argued. This is how we grow, how we build real wealth for everyone here. This is how we lose our identity, Marcus countered. We built this on quality and craftsmanship. Mass production changes that. We can maintain quality at scale, James said. Other workshops do it. Other workshops aren't cooperatives, Marcus shot back. Other workshops have bosses who can enforce standards. We're democratic. How do we maintain quality when everyone has an equal say? The argument circled, voices rising, tensions building. Nate watched it unfold, feeling the fragility of what they'd built. 4 months ago, they'd been strangers. Now they were fighting about the future like family, passionate, invested, afraid of getting it wrong. Finally, he stood, and the room gradually quieted. I think we're asking the wrong question, he said. We're asking whether we can do this. We should be asking whether we should do this, whether it aligns with why we started the cooperative in the first place. Which is what? Sarah asked, her tone sharp. Because I thought we started it to create good jobs and build wealth. We started it because we'd all been thrown away, Nate said quietly. Because the system decided we were disposable. Because there was no safety net and no one was looking out for us. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. We built this to take care of each other. That's the foundation. So the question is, does this contract help us take care of each other, or does it compromise that mission? Silence settled over the room. Then Grant spoke, his voice thoughtful. I think we need more information before we decide. Let me negotiate with them, see what terms we can get, see if there's a way to scale up without compromising quality or our cooperative structure. Then we reconvene and make a decision with all the facts. Everyone agreed to that. The meeting broke up, but the tension lingered. Nate could feel it. The cooperative was at a crossroads, and whatever path they chose would define what they became. Over the next 2 weeks, Grant negotiated. He pushed back on timelines, insisted on quality standards, built-in protections for the cooperative's autonomy. He came back with a revised offer that was more generous and less demanding, but still represented a massive commitment. They met again, debated again. This time the vote was closer, 5 in favor, 4 against. The contract was accepted, but the split made Nate uneasy. We need to be unified going into this, he told Grant afterward. A house divided. I know, but we're not divided on the goal, just on the path. That's healthy, actually. Means people are engaged, thinking critically. Or it means we're about to tear ourselves apart. Grant looked at him seriously. Do you trust this group? Do you trust that we can work through the challenges together? Nate thought about the past 4 months, about Marcus helping winterize pipes, about Sarah's passionate advocacy for growth, about James showing up early to help when they were behind on orders, about the way they'd become something more than co-workers, something closer to family. Yeah, he said finally. I do. Then we move forward, and we figure it out as we go. Hiring for the expansion began immediately. They brought in 6 new workers over the course of 3 weeks, and suddenly the workshop that had felt spacious was crowded and loud. New faces, new personalities, new tensions to navigate. Nate found himself spending more time managing than creating, resolving conflicts and training new people, and ensuring quality didn't slip. He missed the quiet hours at his workbench, missed the meditative rhythm of working wood. But this was leadership. He was learning, sacrificing what you loved to ensure everyone else could thrive. The new workers were a mix. Some came from Fletcher, people Nate had worked with before who were grateful for another chance. Others came from outside Rockford, drawn by word that was spreading about the cooperative, about fair wages and democratic governance and the chance to build something meaningful. One of the new hires, David, had been a foreman at Fletcher. He was older than the others, maybe 50, with the kind of confidence that came from decades of experience. He was good at the work, quick to learn the cooperative's standards, but Nate noticed tension building between David and some of the original workers. It came to a head on a Thursday afternoon. David was showing one of the newer workers how to cut dovetail joints, and his teaching style was forceful, commanding, the way a boss talks to an employee, not the way partners talk to each other. Sarah confronted him. "We don't talk to each other like that here. We're all equals." David looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "I'm teaching him the right way to do it." "There's a way to teach without making someone feel small." "I'm not making him feel small. I'm making him competent." The argument escalated. Voices rose. Other workers stopped what they were doing to watch. Finally, Nate stepped in, physically placing himself between them. "Both of you, take a break. Go cool off." "I don't need to cool off," David said. "I need to do my job." "Your job includes respecting the people you work with. That's non-negotiable." David stared at him, and Nate saw the calculation happening. Challenge the authority or back down. After a long moment, David walked away, his shoulders rigid with anger. Sarah was shaking. "He can't talk to people like that." "I know. I'll handle it." "Will you? Or are you going to let it slide because we need the bodies to fill the contract?" The accusation stung because there was truth in it. They did need the workers. They were already running at capacity, barely keeping up with the new orders. Losing someone, especially someone as skilled as David, would put them behind. But Sarah was right. The cooperative's principles couldn't be negotiable. Nate found David outside, smoking a cigarette in the cold. "I need to talk to you about what happened in there." David exhaled smoke, didn't look at him. I know. Everyone's equal. Democracy. All that. I get it." "Do you?" "Because it doesn't seem like you do." "Look, I've been doing this work for 30 years. I was a foreman. I supervise teams. I know how to get the best out of people, and it's not by coddling them." "We're not asking you to coddle anyone. We're asking you to treat them with respect." "I do respect them. I respect them enough to expect excellence." Nate understood the mindset because he'd worked under people like David at Fletcher. People who confused fear with respect, who thought the only way to maintain standards was through dominance. "This isn't Fletcher," he said carefully. "The hierarchy that worked there doesn't work here. We built this cooperative on the principle that everyone has dignity, everyone has a voice. If you can't work within that structure, this isn't the right place for you." David finally looked at him, his expression hard. "Are you firing me?" "I'm asking you to adapt. Learn a different way of working. If you can't do that, then yeah, this won't work out. And if I quit, you're short-handed for the contract." "Then we're short-handed, but we don't compromise who we are to meet a deadline." They stood in the cold, breath fogging between them. Finally, David dropped his cigarette, ground it out with his boot. "I'll think about it." He left without another word. Nate went back inside, found Sarah waiting. "What happened?" "I told him to adapt or leave." "And?" "We'll see." David showed up the next morning, and his attitude was different. Not transformed, but softer. He worked quietly, kept his teaching style more collaborative, made visible effort to check his tone. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. But the incident had exposed something Nate couldn't ignore. The cooperative was changing, growing, and growth brought complications they hadn't anticipated. The original workers, the ones who'd been there from the beginning, felt the shift. They'd built something intimate and personal, and now it was becoming bigger, more impersonal, harder to navigate. New workers didn't understand the history, the sacrifices that had gone into creating this space. They showed up for the job, which was fine, but they didn't carry the mission the same way. Nate talked to Grant about it one evening, both of them staying late while Eli worked on homework in the office. "We're losing something," Nate said. "I can feel it. The culture we built, it's diluting." That's what happens when you scale. You can't keep the same intimate culture with 20 people that you had with 5. So what do? We be intentional about preserving what matters. We document our values, we hire for culture fit, we create rituals and practices that reinforce who we are. That sounds corporate. It is corporate, but corporate isn't inherently bad. It's just a structure. We can use structure to protect our values instead of undermining them. They started holding weekly all-hands meetings where anyone could raise issues or concerns. They created a mentorship program pairing new workers with original members. They documented their decision-making processes, their quality standards, the principles that guided the cooperative. It helped. Slowly, the new workers started to understand what they'd walked into, started to see this wasn't just a job, but a mission. Some of them embraced it fully, others remained skeptical but respectful. A few left, deciding this wasn't the right fit, and that was okay too. Through all of this, Eli kept coming to the workshop. He was there most days after school, had his own small workbench now, was learning to create simple pieces with increasing skill. He was quiet, more withdrawn than he'd been months ago, but the work seemed to ground him. One afternoon in early February, he looked up from the box he was building, a small jewelry box, carefully jointed, intended as a gift for his grandmother, even though she wouldn't remember receiving it. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When your kid's mom left, how did you explain it to them?" The question hit Nate sideways. He'd never talked about his ex-wife with Eli, hadn't mentioned her to anyone at the cooperative except Grant. "What makes you ask that?" "My mom left when I was little. Dad doesn't talk about her, but sometimes I wonder if she left because of me, because I wasn't enough." Nate set down his tools, pulled up a stool next to Eli's workbench. "Your mom leaving had nothing to do with you. Nothing. People leave because of their own problems, their own pain, not because of anything their kids did or didn't do." "But how do you know? How did you know your kids weren't the reason?" "Because I know my kids. I know they're extraordinary. I know that anyone who walks away from them is losing out, not the other way around." He paused. "And I'm guessing your dad would say the same thing about you." "He says I'm the best thing that ever happened to him." "Do you believe him?" Eli was quiet for a long time, his hands moving over the wood in small, precise motions. "Sometimes. Other times I think, if I was really the best thing, wouldn't that have been enough to make my mom stay? Or to make my grandma remember me?" The raw honesty of it broke something in Nate's chest. This 10-year-old boy, carrying the weight of 2 abandonments, one chosen, one not, but both feeling like rejection. Your grandma's disease isn't about you being enough. It's about her brain betraying her. And your mom, that was about her own struggles. Neither of those things are a referendum on your worth. But it feels like they are. I know, it does feel like that, but feelings aren't always facts. They sat together in comfortable silence, both of them working, both of them processing. Finally, Eli spoke again, his voice very small. "Do you ever stop feeling like you're not enough?" Nate thought about all the nights he'd gone to bed feeling like he'd failed his daughters, about the shame of unemployment, of bills he couldn't pay, of being unable to provide, about how that feeling still crept up on him, sometimes even now, even with steady income and a future that looked hopeful. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I think maybe we just learn to live with it, learn to keep going even when we feel inadequate, because the people who love us, they don't need us to be perfect. They just need us to stay." Eli nodded, bent back over his work. Nate watched him for a moment, this small boy building beautiful things while carrying impossible weight, and felt the responsibility of it, being someone this child trusted with his deepest fears. Grant appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. He'd heard the conversation, Nate could tell by his expression, gratitude and grief mixed together. "Eli, go wash up. We're heading out soon." After Eli left, Grant moved closer to Nate's workbench. "Thank you. For that. For him. He's a good kid." "He is, and he trusts you. That—" Grant's voice roughened. "That means everything." "How's Evelyn?" "Declining. She thought I was my father yesterday. Got angry when I couldn't explain why he wasn't coming home. He paused. The doctors say we're probably looking at months, not years. The progression is aggressive. I'm sorry. Me too. Grant looked around the workshop at the workers cleaning up for the day, at the inventory stacked against the walls. This place, what we built here, it's the only thing that makes sense anymore. Everything else feels like it's falling apart. But this is solid, real. It's because of you, because you took a chance on someone you didn't know. I took a chance because you showed me it was worth taking, because you opened your door in a storm. They stood together in the fading afternoon light, two men who'd found themselves building something neither of them had planned, something that was saving them both in different ways. The next week brought the first major shipment for the national retail contract. 200 cutting boards, 100 serving platters, 50 utensil sets. The cooperative worked extended hours to meet the deadline. Everyone pitching in, the workshop humming with focused intensity. They made the deadline with a day to spare. The quality inspection came back flawless. The retail chain was thrilled, already asking about future orders. Sarah called a celebration. Nothing fancy, just pizza in the workshop after hours. Everyone exhausted but satisfied. Nate looked around at the assembled workers, at the faces that had become familiar, and felt something settle in his chest. They'd done it. Built something real. Something sustainable. Something that mattered. But he also felt the exhaustion, the weight of growth, the recognition that success brought its own complications. They were no longer a small cooperative figuring things out together. They were becoming a business, with all the pressures and expectations that came with that. "Speech!" someone called out, and others took up the chant. "Speech! Speech!" Nate stood reluctantly, feeling self-conscious. "I'm not good at speeches." "Just talk," Marcus said. "Tell us what you're thinking." Nate looked around the room, at these people who'd become something like family. "I'm thinking about where we started, about being lost and scared and not knowing if tomorrow would be better than today, about feeling disposable." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "We built this place because we needed it, because we needed to know that we mattered, that our work mattered, that we could take care of each other, and we did that. We're doing that. Every day we show up here, we prove that another way is possible." "Damn right," someone called out, and others murmured agreement. "But I'm also thinking about what comes next, about how we stay true to who we are as we grow, about how we don't lose what made this special in the first place." He met Sarah's eyes, then David's, then Grant's. "We're going to face harder decisions, bigger challenges, times when the easy path conflicts with the right path. And when that happens, I hope we remember why we started this. Remember that people come before profit, that dignity matters more than efficiency, that we're here to build each other up, not grind each other down." The room was silent, everyone listening. Nate felt the weight of their attention, their trust, their hope. "So here's what I'm asking. As we grow, as we take on bigger contracts and hire more people and face more complicated decisions, let's not forget. Let's not forget what it felt like to be thrown away. Let's not forget that we built this to take care of each other. Let's not become the thing we were trying to escape." "We won't," Sarah said firmly. "We won't let that happen." "Good, because this," he gestured around the workshop, "this is the most important work I've ever done. Not the furniture, the community. And I don't want to lose it." They raised their drinks, paper cups filled with soda and water, and toasted to the cooperative, to each other, to the future they were building together. And Nate let himself feel it, the pride, the gratitude, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could hold on to what mattered even as everything changed around them. The celebration lasted until nearly midnight, and Nate walked home through streets slick with February ice, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, contentment mixed with exhaustion, the good kind that comes from work that matters. But when he opened his front door, Lily was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her homework spread out in front of her. "Why aren't you in bed?" he asked, checking his watch. "It's past 11. "I was waiting for you." She looked up, and Nate saw something in her expression that made his stomach tighten. "We need to talk about something." He sat down across from her, suddenly alert. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just—" She pushed a piece of paper across the table. "My teacher gave me this today. It's about a program for gifted students. Special classes, advanced work, that kind of thing. Nate picked up the flyer, scanned it. Academic enrichment program meets 3 afternoons a week, designed for high-achieving students who needed more challenge. Then he saw the cost. $200 a month. You want to do this? Lily nodded, her eyes anxious. But if we can't afford it, that's okay. I just thought, maybe now that you have the good job, we can afford it. The words came out automatically, but Nate felt the weight of them. $200 a month was manageable now, barely, but it would be tight. Still, watching Lily's face light up made the math worthwhile. Really? You mean it? I mean it. If this is what you want, we'll make it work. She threw her arms around him, and Nate held her tight, feeling the complicated tangle of pride and pressure. He could give his daughter this opportunity. He could say yes instead of no. But the responsibility of that, of being able to provide but still having to budget carefully, felt heavier than the days when there was simply nothing to give. The next morning, he mentioned it to Grant, who was reviewing production schedules in his office. That's wonderful, Grant said. Lily's incredibly bright. This'll be good for her. Yeah, Nate hesitated. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong and make all this disappear. That's trauma talking. You spent so long in survival mode that stability feels dangerous. Does it get easier? Trusting that things will be okay? Grant looked at him steadily. I don't know. My father built this company from nothing and died thinking he hadn't done enough. I inherited his success and still wake up at 3 in the morning wondering if I'm failing. He paused. But I'm learning that maybe the fear doesn't go away. You just learn to act despite it. The conversation stayed with Nate through the week as he threw himself into the work. The retail contract had opened doors to other opportunities. Specialty kitchen stores, high-end gift shops, even a few restaurant supply companies interested in custom pieces. The cooperative was busier than ever, producing at capacity, and the revenue was real and steady and growing. But so were the tensions. David had settled into the cooperative's culture better than expected, but conflicts still flared regularly. Sarah was pushing hard for the retail space, growing impatient with the 6-month timeline. Some of the newer workers resented what they saw as preferential treatment of the original members. The democratic structure that had worked beautifully with 5 people was getting unwieldy with 15. Nate found himself mediating more than creating, spending his days navigating personalities and conflicts instead of working with wood. He'd become a manager without ever meaning to, and the role sat uncomfortably on his shoulders. One afternoon in mid-February, things came to a head. Sarah and David got into a heated argument about production priorities. She wanted to focus on high-margin custom pieces. He insisted they needed to prioritize volume for the retail contract. The argument escalated until Sarah finally snapped. You don't even believe in what we're building here. You just want a paycheck. David's face went red. I believe in doing quality work and meeting our commitments. You believe in chasing whatever makes you feel important. That's enough. Nate stepped between them, his voice sharper than he intended. Both of you, outside. Now. They followed him into the cold February air, both still radiating anger. Nate let them stand there for a minute, letting the cold work on their tempers before he spoke. This stops. Today. I don't care who started it or who's right. We don't talk to each other like that. We don't undermine each other. We work together, or this whole thing falls apart. He doesn't respect what we built, Sarah said, her voice tight. She thinks the cooperative exists to validate her ego, David shot back. Stop. Nate's voice cut through the argument. You want to know what I see? I see 2 people who care deeply about this place and are terrified of losing it. Sarah, you're pushing so hard because you're afraid we'll settle for mediocrity. David, you're resisting because you're afraid we'll crash and burn chasing growth we're not ready for. He looked between them. You're both right, and you're both wrong. And you need to figure out how to work together anyway. Sarah crossed her arms, her jaw tight. How, when we disagree about fundamental direction? You talk, you compromise. You trust that the democratic process will get us to the right answer, even if it's not the answer you wanted. Nate softened his tone. Look, I get it. I struggle with this too. But we built something special here, and the only way it survives is if we choose each other over being right. They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, David spoke, his voice grudging but genuine. I do believe in this place. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Sarah nodded slowly. And I'm not trying to chase ego. I see what we could become, and I'm impatient to get there. Then work together to get there. Please. Nate looked at both of them. Because I can't hold this together alone. I need you both pulling in the same direction. They went back inside, the tension diffused, if not eliminated. But Nate felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. He was being asked to be something he'd never trained for. A leader, a mediator, someone who held space for conflict and guided people through it. That evening, Grant found him sitting alone in the workshop long after everyone else had left, staring at a half-finished cutting board. Rough day? Every day feels rough lately. Grant pulled up a stool, sat down beside him. You're doing a good job, better than you think. I'm barely holding it together. Sarah and David nearly came to blows today. Marcus is frustrated with the pace of change. Half the newer workers don't understand why we do things the way we do. Nate rubbed his face. I'm a craftsman, Grant. I know how to work wood. I don't know how to lead people. You're learning. That's all any of us are doing. What if I'm learning too slow? What if I make a mistake that costs everyone everything? Grant was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. When my father died and left me this company, I was terrified. I was 25, barely out of business school, suddenly responsible for 200 employees and their families. I made mistakes constantly, big ones. He paused. But I learned that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up consistently, admitting when you're wrong, and trusting the people around you to help you figure it out. Did you ever want to just walk away? Every day for the first 2 years, then occasionally after that. Then, Grant's voice roughened. Then I had Eli, and my wife left, and suddenly I didn't have the luxury of walking away. I had to figure it out because he was depending on me. Nate understood that. The weight of being responsible for someone else's survival, someone else's future, the way it simultaneously crushed you and kept you standing. How's Eli doing? He asked, changing the subject. He's struggling. The school counselor wants him to start therapy, says he's dealing with complicated grief. Grant's hands were restless, fidgeting with a scrap of wood on the workbench. He keeps asking when Grandma is coming home. Doesn't understand that she's not. Can I help? You already do. Having him here working with you, it's the only time he seems calm. They sat together in the quiet workshop, two men carrying weight they never expected, finding comfort in shared silence and the smell of wood and the knowledge that they weren't carrying it alone. The next week brought unexpected news. The national retail chain wanted to double their order. Same quality standards, accelerated timeline, significantly increased revenue. It should have been cause for celebration, but Nate felt only dread. He called an emergency cooperative meeting. Everyone gathered in the workshop, tired from a long day but alert when they saw his face. We got another contract offer, he said without preamble. Double our current retail volume, needs to be delivered in 8 weeks. Silence. Then Sarah spoke, her voice excited. That's incredible. That's exactly the kind of growth we need. It's also impossible, Marcus said flatly. We're already running at capacity. We can't double output in 8 weeks. We could if we hired more people, Sarah argued. And trained them when, while we're also trying to double production? David shook his head. The math doesn't work. The debate exploded across the room. Some people saw opportunity, others saw disaster. Voices rose, frustrations that had been simmering beneath the surface bubbling over. Finally, Nate stood, and the room gradually quieted. Before we argue about whether we can do this, we need to ask if we should do this. He looked around at the assembled workers. What happens if we take this contract and fail? If we can't meet quality standards or deadlines? We damage our reputation, maybe lose the original contract too. But what if we succeed, Sarah challenged. What if we prove we can scale up? This could transform the cooperative. Or break it. Nate kept his voice level. I'm not saying we turn it down. I'm saying we need to think carefully about what we're risking. But Grant spoke from the back of the room. Can I offer a suggestion? What if we propose a modified timeline, 12 weeks instead of 8? That gives us time to hire and train properly, to scale up sustainably instead of frantically. They might say no, Sarah pointed out. Then they say no, but at least we're not overcommitting and failing. They put it to a vote. 9 in favor of negotiating for a longer timeline, 6 in favor of accepting the 8-week deadline as offered. The motion carried. Grant negotiated with the retail chain. They pushed back initially, but eventually agreed to 10 weeks. It was still aggressive, still risky, but manageable if everything went right. The cooperative went into overdrive. They hired 4 more workers, brought in additional equipment, extended to a second shift. Nate split his time between training new hires and managing production flow, working 12-hour days and coming home too exhausted to do anything but collapse. Lily noticed. "You look tired, Daddy. Just busy at work, baby. Are you working too much?" The question hit harder than it should have. He thought about Grant working himself to exhaustion trying to prove something. Thought about his own father, who died of a heart attack at 55 because rest felt like weakness. "Maybe," he admitted, "but it's temporary. Just until we get through this contract." "That's what you said last time." She was right. He'd been saying temporary for weeks now, and the temporary kept extending, kept demanding more. He was becoming the thing he'd criticized, so focused on building something that he was sacrificing presence for provision. He tried to pull back, to be more intentional about time with the girls. Sunday became sacred. No work, no phone calls, just him and Lily and Mia. They went to the park, baked cookies, watched movies curled up on the couch. Those days were the only time Nate felt like himself instead of the person he was becoming. But the pressure kept mounting. 2 weeks into the accelerated production schedule, one of the new hires quit without notice. 3 days later, a shipment of lumber came in wrong, maple instead of walnut, unusable for the current orders. The delays cascaded, eating into their buffer time. Nate found himself snapping at people, his patience worn thin by exhaustion and stress. He caught himself mid-sentence one afternoon, heard the sharpness in his tone, saw the hurt on the worker's face, and hated what he was becoming. That night he sat in the workshop alone, head in his hands, wondering if this was worth it. The cooperative had given him stability, purpose, community, but it was also consuming him, demanding pieces of himself he wasn't sure he could afford to give. His phone rang, Grant's name on the screen. "Hey, can you come to the hospital? It's Mom. She had a stroke. His voice broke. "They don't think she has long." Nate was moving before he'd consciously decided, grabbing his coat, calling his neighbor to watch the girls, driving through the dark February night to Rockford General. He found Grant in the ICU waiting room, Eli curled up asleep in a chair beside him. "How is she?" "Unconscious. They say it's just a matter of time now." Grant looked hollow, emptied out. "I thought we had more time. She's only 72. I thought—" He didn't finish. Nate sat down beside him, and they waited together in the fluorescent silence of the hospital. 2 men who'd found themselves bound together by a rainstorm 6 months ago, by choices neither of them could have predicted. Evelyn died just before dawn. Grant was with her, holding her hand, and when he came out of her room, his face was transformed by grief. "She's gone." Nate pulled him into a hug, felt him shake with sobs he'd been holding back for months. Eli woke up, saw his father crying, and understood without being told. The 3 of them stood together in that sterile hallway, holding each other up while the sun rose on a world that had 1 less person in it. The funeral was 3 days later. The cooperative shut down for the afternoon, everyone attending to support Grant and Eli. Nate sat in the church. He'd made an exception to his usual avoidance of religious spaces and listened to people talk about Evelyn's life, her kindness, her sharp mind before the disease took it away. Grant spoke last, his voice steady but his hands shaking. "My mother taught me that wealth isn't measured in money, but in the lives you touch, in the community you build, in the people you help when helping costs you something." He looked directly at Nate. "She lived that way, and she challenged me to do the same. I hope I'm making her proud." After the service, at the reception, person after person came up to Nate asking who he was, how he knew Evelyn. He told the story, the rainstorm opening his door the night that had changed everything. And people smiled, nodded, said that sounded like Evelyn, always looking for ways to connect people and build community. Eli found him late in the afternoon, standing alone by the window, The boy's eyes were red but dry, cried out for now. She's really gone, Eli said quietly. Yeah. I keep thinking I should have visited more. Should have, I don't know, done something to make her remember me. You did everything you could. You were there. That's what mattered. Was it enough? Nate looked down at this 10-year-old carrying impossible questions. I don't know if anything is ever enough when you lose someone. But you loved her. She knew that, even when she couldn't remember your name. Love like that, it stays even when memory goes. Eli nodded, processing this. Then, are you going to keep working with us? With my dad? Of course. Why wouldn't I? I thought maybe now that Grandma's gone, things would change. Some things will change, but not that. We're building something together, your dad and me. That doesn't stop just because... Nate's voice caught. That doesn't stop. They stood together watching the reception, watching people gather and talk and support each other through grief. And Nate thought about how this was community too, showing up for hard things, holding space for pain, proving that people didn't have to face the worst moments alone. The week after the funeral was brutal. Grant tried to come back to work but couldn't focus, kept disappearing into his office to cry. Eli was withdrawn, barely speaking, going through the motions of school and workshop time like a ghost of himself. And the cooperative was still running at full capacity, still trying to meet the impossible deadline, still demanding more than anyone had to give. Something had to break. Nate felt it building, the pressure becoming unsustainable. And on a Wednesday afternoon in early March, it finally did. Sarah came to him with resignation in her eyes and a letter in her hand. I'm leaving. I found a job at a design firm in Chicago. Better pay, better hours, room to grow. The words hit Nate like a physical blow. Sarah, no, we need you. The cooperative needs you. The cooperative needs to figure out what it wants to be. And I've realized it's not what I need. She looked around the workshop, her expression complicated. I believe in what we're trying to build here. I do. But I can't keep fighting to grow while everyone else wants to stay safe. I can't keep pushing against resistance all the time. So you're giving up? I'm choosing myself. There's a difference. Nate wanted to argue, to convince her to stay, but looking at her face, he saw the decision was already made. And maybe she was right. Maybe the cooperative wasn't ready for the kind of aggressive growth she wanted. Maybe her leaving was best for everyone. When? He asked quietly. 2 weeks. I'll help train my replacement, finish my current projects. Okay. He held out his hand. Thank you for everything you built here. She shook it, her grip firm. Build something beautiful, Nate. You've got the foundation. Just don't be afraid to grow. After she left, Nate sat at his workbench and let the defeat wash over him. They were already short-handed, already struggling to meet the contract deadline, and now they were losing one of their best workers. The cooperative he'd thought was thriving was fracturing, people leaving or checking out or fighting about direction. Marcus found him an hour later, still sitting there. Heard about Sarah? Yeah. You okay? I don't know. I thought we'd figured it out, thought we were building something sustainable. But maybe we're just delaying the inevitable. Marcus pulled up a stool, sat down heavily. Can I tell you something? Before I came here, before the cooperative, I was 3 weeks from losing my house. My wife was working 2 jobs, my kids were eating cereal for dinner, and I was applying to places that paid minimum wage just to have something coming in. He paused. This place saved my family. Even if it falls apart tomorrow, even if we can't make it work long term, you gave me 6 months of stability when I had none. That matters. But what if it's not enough? What if I brought you all here just to watch it fail? Then we fail. But at least we tried something different. At least we proved another way was possible, even if just for a little while. Nate looked at him, at the quiet conviction in his face, and felt something settle. Marcus was right. They'd built something meaningful, even if it was imperfect, even if it didn't last forever. That had to count for something. Thank you, he said quietly. I needed to hear that. We all need to hear it sometimes. Marcus stood, stretched. Come on, we've got work to do. Let's finish this contract and figure out the rest later. They threw themselves into the final push. Everyone working overtime, covering for Sarah's departure, supporting Grant through his grief, pushing through exhaustion and doubt. The workshop became a second home. People eating meals together, sleeping in shifts, building community through shared struggle. And slowly, impossibly, they made it work. The orders got completed, the quality held, the deadline was met with 3 days to spare. When the final shipment went out, the entire cooperative gathered to watch the truck pull away, and the cheer that went up was equal parts relief and triumph. "We did it," Grant said, his arm around Eli's shoulders. "We actually did it." "Yeah," Nate agreed, feeling the exhaustion in his bones, but also the pride. "We did." That night, the cooperative gathered for another celebration. This time the pizza was better, the mood more complex, joy and grief and exhaustion and hope all tangled together. People told stories about Evelyn, about Sarah, about the impossible weeks they'd just survived. And Nate looked around at the faces, some missing, some new, all of them marked by the journey, and felt the weight and the gift of it. They were building something real here, imperfect, sometimes messy, definitely complicated, but real. And that mattered more than he'd known how to articulate. Grant pulled him aside late in the evening when most people had already left. "I want to thank you for everything, for being here through," his voice roughened, "through all of it. That's what partners do." "Is that what we are? Partners?" Nate thought about the past 6 months, about everything they'd built and survived together. "Yeah, I think we are." Grant nodded, satisfied with that answer. Then, "Mom left something for you. In her will. I picked it up from the lawyer today." He handed Nate a small wooden box, beautifully crafted, clearly expensive. Inside was a note in Evelyn's handwriting, shaky but legible. "For Nate, the man who opened his door in a storm and reminded us all what kindness looks like. Thank you for saving my family. Now let us help save yours." Beneath the note was a check. Nate stared at the number, not quite believing it. $50,000. "Grant, I can't. This is too much." "She wanted you to have it. Wanted to make sure you had security, that your daughters had opportunities." Grant's smile was sad. "She saw in you something I'd forgotten to look for: decency, integrity, the willingness to sacrifice for others. She wanted to honor that." Nate folded carefully, his hands shaking. This money, it was more than security. It was freedom, college funds for the girls, a house with a yard, the ability to breathe without constantly calculating. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll use it well. Say you'll keep building what we started." "I will. I promise." They stood together in the quiet workshop, two men bound by loss and hope, and the community they'd built from nothing. And Nate felt the full weight of it, the responsibility, the possibility, the terrifying, beautiful potential of what came next. The storm had passed, the door had opened, and everything that came after was just the long, hard, worthwhile work of building something that lasted. The check sat on Nate's kitchen table for 3 days before he could bring himself to deposit it. Every time he looked at the number, $50,000 written in Evelyn's careful handwriting, he felt the weight of it, the responsibility of honoring her faith in him. On the 4th morning, Lily found him staring at it over his coffee. "What's that?" "It's a gift. From Mrs. Porter, Eli's grandmother." Lily picked up the check carefully, her eyes widening when she saw the amount. "That's a lot of money." "It is." "What are you going to do with it?" Nate had been asking himself the same question for 3 days. The practical part of him wanted to be sensible, pay off debt, build a real emergency fund, secure their future. But another part kept thinking about what Evelyn had said that night in the storm, about how kindness should cascade, about building community instead of just protecting yourself. "I don't know yet," he told Lily. "What do you think I should do?" She considered this seriously, her 8-year-old face scrunched in concentration. "I think you should do something that would make her happy, something that helps people like she helped us." Out of the mouths of children. Nate pulled his daughter close, kissed the top of her head. "That's exactly right, baby. That's exactly what I should do." That afternoon, he went to the bank, deposited the check, and then called a meeting with Grant and the Workers' Council. They gathered in Grant's office, Marcus and James joining Nate around the conference table. "I want to talk about the retail space," Nate said without preamble. "I know we agreed to wait, but I think it's time. And I want to fund it." Sarah's departure had left a hole in the cooperative's vision, but it had also clarified something for Nate. They needed to grow, but they needed to grow in a way that stayed true to their values. A retail space wasn't just about revenue. It was about visibility, about showing people that another way was possible. With what capital? Marcus asked. The reserve fund isn't big enough yet. Nate explained about Evelyn's gift, about the $50,000 that could become seed money for the next phase. The room went quiet. That's your money, Grant said carefully. Your daughter's future. You shouldn't risk it on what? On the thing we've been building together? On creating more opportunities for more people? Nate shook his head. This is exactly what Evelyn wanted, to invest in community, to build something that lasts. They debated for 2 hours, running numbers, assessing risks, mapping out timelines. Finally, they put together a proposal. Use $25,000 from Evelyn's gift, match it with funds from the cooperative's reserve. Use the combined capital to open a small retail space in downtown Rockford. Not huge, not flashy, but theirs. We'd need someone to manage it, James pointed out. Someone who understands retail, customer service, the whole operation. I might know someone, Grant said slowly. There's a woman I've worked with before, consultancy basis. She helped me set up our import showroom. Let me reach out, see if she'd be interested. The woman's name was Patricia Chen, and she met with them the following week. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and efficient, with 20 years of retail management experience and a no-nonsense approach that reminded Nate of Evelyn. Why a cooperative? She asked bluntly. Why not just a standard business structure? Because we believe people should have ownership of their work, Nate said. Should have a voice in the decisions that affect their lives. Should be invested in each other's success. Patricia studied him for a long moment. I worked retail for 15 years before I went into consulting. Spent most of that time being treated like I was disposable, like my only value was how fast I could move product. It wore me down. She paused. I like what you're building here. If you're serious about it, I'm interested. They brought her on as a consultant first, tasked with finding and evaluating potential retail locations. She came back 2 weeks later with 3 options, each with detailed analysis of foot traffic, demographics, lease terms, and build-out costs. The cooperative voted unanimously on a corner storefront on Main Street, good visibility, reasonable rent, close enough to the workshop that moving inventory would be simple. The lease was signed in early April, just as Rockford was shaking off winter and tentatively reaching for spring. Nate stood in the empty retail space with Grant and Patricia, looking at bare walls and dusty floors, and tried to envision what it would become. We'll need display fixtures, signage, a point-of-sale system, Patricia was saying, making notes on her tablet. And we should think about experience, not just transaction. Make it a space people want to spend time in. What does that look like? Grant asked. Workshop demonstrations? Maybe one Saturday a month, bring in one of your craftspeople to do a live build. Let customers see the process, understand the work that goes into each piece. She warmed to the idea as she spoke. And we could do community events, local artisan showcases, craft workshops for kids. Make it more than just a store. Nate felt excitement building, the same feeling he'd had 6 months ago when Grant first showed him the warehouse space. They were creating something again, building toward a vision that felt bigger than profit. The build-out took 6 weeks. The cooperative members pitched in after regular work hours, painting walls, installing fixtures, building custom display pieces. Lily and Mia came sometimes, helping where they could, and Nate watched his daughters sand and paint alongside the other workers' kids and felt the full meaning of what they were building. Not just a business, but a legacy, a way of being in the world that his children could carry forward. Eli was there most days too, working beside his father and Nate, slowly emerging from the grief that had consumed him after Evelyn's death. The boy had grown quieter, more serious, but the work still grounded him. One afternoon, while they were installing shelving, he spoke without looking up from his task. I've been thinking about what Grandma said, about taking care of people. Yeah? Nate held the level steady while Eli marked the wall. She used to tell me that wealth isn't about what you have, it's about what you give. I didn't really understand what she meant until... He paused, his voice catching. Until I saw what you and Dad built, how you help people. Your grandma understood something important, that we're all connected, that taking care of each other isn't charity, it's just good sense. Do you think she'd be proud of the store, of all of this? Nate looked at this boy who'd lost so much and still showed up every day trying to make sense of the world. I think she'd be incredibly proud of your dad, of the cooperative, and especially of you. I miss her. I know, that doesn't go away, but you honor her by living the way she taught you to live. Eli nodded, bent back to his work, and they finished the shelving in comfortable silence. The retail store opened on a Saturday in late May, warm sunshine pouring through the big front windows, and the turnout exceeded everyone's expectations. People from all over Rockford came, former Fletcher employees, local business owners, families who'd heard about the cooperative through word of mouth. The store was packed from opening until closing, people examining the cutting boards and serving platters and custom pieces with appreciation that went beyond simple consumerism. Patricia moved through the crowd with easy confidence, answering questions, processing sales, making connections. She'd brought in several workers from the cooperative to help for the opening, teaching them customer service on the fly, and Nate watched them engage with customers and felt pride swell in his chest. Marcus was demonstrating dovetail joints at a workbench they'd set up in the corner, a crowd gathering to watch his hands move with practiced precision. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, stood transfixed. "Can I try?" she asked shyly. Marcus looked at her parents, who nodded permission, then handed her a small chisel. "Okay, but carefully. See this line? We're going to cut right along here." He guided her hands, patient and gentle, and when she successfully made her first cut, her face lit up with pure joy. Her parents bought a cutting board and asked about workshop classes for kids. Marcus took their information, promised to follow up, and Nate saw the moment something shifted in his expression. The realization that this was bigger than just selling products, this was building community. By the end of the day, they'd sold more than Patricia's most optimistic projections. But more than the revenue, what struck Nate was the conversations. Person after person stopping him to say they'd heard about the cooperative, about what they were trying to build, about the second chances and the democratic structure and the commitment to taking care of each other. "This is what Rockford needs," one older woman told him, tears in her eyes. "My husband worked at Fletcher for 30 years. When they closed, it broke something in him. Seeing this, seeing people finding meaningful work again, it gives me hope." After closing, the cooperative members gathered in the store, exhausted but energized. Grant stood at the front, Eli beside him, and called for everyone's attention. "Today was incredible, but I want to make sure we all understand what we accomplished. This isn't just about a successful opening. It's proof of concept, proof that another way is possible, that businesses can operate with values at the center, that taking care of people and making a profit aren't mutually exclusive." He paused, his voice thickening with emotion. "My mother believed that. She believed we could build something better, and today, we proved her right." The room erupted in applause. Nate felt Grant's eyes find his across the crowd, saw the gratitude and grief and hope mixed there, and nodded in acknowledgement. They'd done this together, built something that mattered, honored Evelyn's memory in the most meaningful way possible. The weeks following the store opening brought new challenges and new opportunities. The visibility of the retail space led to more custom orders, more interest in the cooperative model, more people wanting to be part of what they were building. They hired 3 more workers, all of them carefully vetted not just for skills but for cultural fit, for understanding what made the cooperative different. One of the new hires was a woman named Teresa, 52 years old, who'd been laid off from Fletcher and spent 2 years cycling through temporary jobs that barely covered her rent. Her first day, she stood in the middle of the workshop looking around with something like wonder. "I didn't think places like this existed anymore," she said quietly to Nate. "Places that treat workers like human beings. They don't, mostly. That's why we had to build our own." She threw herself into the work with an intensity that bordered on desperation, like she was afraid the opportunity would disappear if she didn't prove her worth every single day. Nate recognized the instinct. He'd felt it himself 6 months ago and made a point of pulling her aside after her first week. "You're doing great work, Teresa, but you don't have to kill yourself to keep this job. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for partnership. I can't lose this. My daughter's in college, I'm helping with tuition, and if I lose this job, you're not going to lose it. You're part of the cooperative now. That means something here. It means we invest in you, support you, help you succeed. Okay?" She nodded, not quite believing it yet, but wanting to. And over the following weeks, Nate watched her slowly relax, slowly start to trust that this was real, that the security wasn't going to be yanked away. It reminded him why this mattered, why they'd fought so hard to build something different. In June, Grant came to Nate with another proposal. "I've been thinking about the cooperative structure. Right now, it's still technically my company, with you and the workers as stakeholders. I want to change that. I want to fully transition to a worker-owned cooperative where everyone has equal ownership stake. That's a big step. It's the right step. It's what we've been building toward all along. I'll retain a role as advisor, maybe board member, but the workers should own this. You should own this." They spent 2 months working with lawyers and accountants to restructure everything. It was complex and sometimes overwhelming, but when they finally signed the papers in August, transferring ownership to the cooperative members, the shift felt monumental. Nate stood in front of the assembled workers, holding the certificate that made them all official owners, and felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. "This is ours now, all of ours. Every decision, every success, every challenge, we face it together, we own it together, and we build it together." He looked around at the faces that had become so familiar. 6 months ago, most of us were desperate, struggling, convinced the world had forgotten us. Today, we're business owners, we're partners, we're proof that another way is possible. Don't ever forget what that means. The celebration that followed was joyful, but also sobering. They understood the responsibility they'd taken on, the challenge of making this work long-term. But they also felt the power of it, the knowledge that their labor belonged to them, that their voice mattered, that their future was in their own hands. Lily's enrichment program ended in June with a showcase where students presented their year's work. Nate sat in the audience, watching his daughter give a presentation on sustainable forestry, her confidence and intelligence on full display, and felt tears prick his eyes. This was what Evelyn's gift had made possible, not just financial security, but opportunities, growth, the space for his children to flourish. After the presentation, Lily's teacher pulled him aside. "Your daughter is remarkable. Have you thought about the Advanced Academy? It's a public magnet school, full-day program for gifted students, free tuition, just an application process." Nate felt his heart stutter. "She'd qualify?" "Absolutely. I think she'd thrive there." That night he talked to Lily about it, watched her face light up with excitement and fear in equal measure. "What if I'm not smart enough?" she asked, the old insecurity surfacing. "You're brilliant. But more than that, you're curious and hardworking and kind. Those things matter more than raw intelligence." "Would I have to leave my current school? Leave my friends?" "Yeah, it would be a big change." She was quiet for a long time, thinking it through with the seriousness she brought to everything. Finally, she looked up at him with those 2 old eyes that were starting, slowly, to look more like a child's again. "I want to try. I'm scared, but I want to try." "Then we'll make it happen." They submitted the application in July. Lily was accepted in August, set to start at the Advanced Academy in September. Nate enrolled Mia in a better elementary school in the same district, using the remainder of Evelyn's gift to cover transportation and supplies. His daughters were getting opportunities he'd never dreamed possible a year ago, and the knowledge of that felt like both a gift and a responsibility. The cooperative continued to grow through the summer. They took on an apprenticeship program, bringing in high school students interested in woodworking, teaching them skills and work ethic and the value of craftsmanship. Eli was one of the first apprentices, working alongside his father and Nate and the other cooperative members, learning not just how to build furniture, but how to build community. In September, they opened a second retail location, this one in a neighboring town. Patricia managed both stores with the help of several cooperative members who discovered they had a talent for customer service and sales. The expansion was careful, measured, sustainable, exactly what Sarah had pushed for but executed with the patience Grant had advocated. One afternoon in late September, almost exactly a year after that rainy night when everything changed, Nate was working at his bench when Grant appeared beside him. "I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his tone made Nate set down his tools. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right." Grant paused, choosing his words carefully. I've been offered a position, board member for a national nonprofit that helps displaced workers transition to cooperative businesses. They want me to use what we built here as a model, help replicate it in other communities. Nate's stomach dropped. You're leaving? Not leaving. Stepping back. The cooperative doesn't need me day to day anymore. It has strong leadership, solid structure, sustainable revenue. It needs someone who can help it grow, and that's you, not me. I don't know how to... Yes, you do. You've been doing it for months, leading, managing, making hard calls. You're ready for this. They stood together in the workshop, surrounded by the sound of creation, and Nate felt the full weight of what Grant was saying. This was his now, the cooperative, the responsibility, the future. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. When? He asked quietly. End of the month. I'll still be around for board meetings, advisory stuff, and Eli wants to keep working here, if that's okay. More than okay. He's family. Grant's face crumpled slightly, then steadied. Thank you for everything, for being there when I needed it, when my family needed it. You opened a door too. When I was lost and desperate, we saved each other. They shook hands, then pulled into a hug, two men who'd found themselves building something neither expected, something that had transformed both their lives. Grant's transition happened smoothly over the following month. The cooperative threw him a farewell party that was really more of a celebration of what they'd built together. Person after person stood up to share stories about what the cooperative had meant to them, how it had changed their lives, given them hope when hope seemed impossible. Teresa spoke about paying off her daughter's tuition, about sleeping through the night without anxiety for the first time in years. Marcus talked about his kids having stability, about being able to plan for the future instead of just surviving the present. Patricia shared how finding the cooperative had reminded her why she'd loved retail in the first place. The human connection, the community building, the chance to make people's days better. When it was Nate's turn, he stood in front of the assembled workers and tried to find words for everything he felt. A year ago, I was standing in the rain, watching a confused woman and a scared little boy drift past my house like they had nowhere to go. I should have walked past them. Logic said I should protect what little I had, but something deeper than logic made me open my door. He paused, his throat tight. That choice, that one moment of choosing to help instead of protecting scarcity, it started a chain reaction that saved my life. That saved all our lives, and it taught me something fundamental. We rise together or we fall alone. There's no in between. He looked at Grant, who was standing in the back with Eli beside him. Thank you for seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself, for taking a chance on a desperate man with nothing to offer but the willingness to work hard, for building this with us, for proving that business can be different, that success and values aren't mutually exclusive. The room erupted in applause. Grant wiped his eyes, pulled Eli close, and mouthed "thank you" across the crowd. October brought cooler weather and a steady rhythm to the cooperative. Nate settled into his new role as de facto leader, managing the workshop, overseeing the retail operations, negotiating contracts, and guiding the cooperative through decisions about expansion and sustainability. It was challenging work, but deeply fulfilling in a way his old job at Fletcher had never been. The girls thrived in their new schools. Lily came home bursting with stories about advanced science projects and debate club. Mia was reading above grade level, making friends, asking questions about everything. They moved to a better house in November. Not huge, not fancy, but solid and warm, with a small yard where Mia could play and Lily could read under a tree. The night they moved in, Nate stood in the kitchen of their new home and let himself feel the full weight of how far they'd come. From $37 and a crumbling rental to this, stability, security, opportunity. From desperate and alone to surrounded by community and support. Lily found him standing there, lost in thought. You okay, Daddy? Yeah, baby. Just thinking about how different things are now. Better different? So much better. She hugged him, and Mia joined them, and they stood together in their new kitchen, feeling the safety of walls that didn't leak and heat that stayed on, and a future that looked brighter than anything Nate had dared imagine. In December, the cooperative held its first annual meeting as a fully worker-owned entity. Every member gathered to review the year's financials, vote on next year's direction, celebrate successes, and acknowledge challenges. The numbers were strong, revenue up 40% from the year before, all members receiving both salary and profit-sharing distributions, the reserve fund healthy and growing. But the real success, Nate told them, wasn't in the numbers. It was in the lives changed, the families stabilized, the community built. It was in Teresa being able to help her daughter graduate college debt-free, in Marcus taking his family on their first real vacation in 5 years, in James having health insurance for the first time since his Fletcher job ended, in every person in this room having dignity and voice and ownership of their work. We built something that matters, he said, looking around at faces that had become like family, something that proves another way is possible. And now we have a responsibility to protect it, grow it responsibly, and share it. Grants out there helping other communities build cooperatives. We need to support that work, be examples of what's possible, and never forget why we started this in the first place. The vote to establish a fund for supporting other cooperative initiatives passed unanimously. They committed 5% of annual profits to helping displaced workers in other communities start their own cooperatives, creating a ripple effect of the kindness that had started everything. On Christmas Eve, Nate took the girls to visit Evelyn's grave. They'd never met her, but they knew her story, understood what she'd done for their family. Lily placed flowers on the headstone while Mia stood quietly, her small hand in Nate's. "Tell her thank you," Lily said softly. "Tell her we're doing good because of her." Nate knelt by the grave, his daughters beside him, and spoke to a woman who'd changed everything without meaning to, simply by getting lost in a storm and trusting a stranger to help. "We did it, Evelyn. Built something beautiful from that one rainy night. Your gift, it's multiplying, spreading, becoming exactly what you hoped. Thank you for believing in kindness. Thank you for believing in us." They stood together in the quiet cemetery, 3 people shaped by a choice made in a moment of need, by a door opened when it could have stayed closed. New Year's Eve brought the cooperative together one more time, this gathering less formal than the annual meeting, more about celebration and connection. They ate and laughed and told stories about the year's challenges and triumphs. The children ran through the workshop, playing hide and seek among the workbenches, while adults watched with contentment. Eli found Nate near midnight, the boy's face thoughtful. He was 12 now, taller, his voice starting to change, but still carrying that quiet seriousness that grief had etched into him. "I've been thinking about that night, the storm, when you found me and Grandma." "Yeah? If you hadn't opened your door, if you'd just let us walk past, everything would be different, for all of us." "Probably." "Why did you? Open your door, I mean, when you barely had anything yourself?" Nate thought about that question, about the moment when he'd seen a boy and an old woman lost in the rain and made a choice that defied logic. I think I did it because I knew what it felt like to be lost, to need help and not know where to find it, and I couldn't walk past that, couldn't pretend I didn't see it." "Do you ever regret it? All the complications it brought?" "Never. Not once. Because yes, it brought complications, but it also brought community, family, purpose, all the things that make life worth living." He looked at Eli seriously. "Your grandmother taught me something that night. She said most people would have closed the door, but I didn't. And for a long time I thought that made me special. But I've learned something since then. I'm not special. I'm just someone who is desperate enough to understand that we need each other, that we rise together or fall alone." Eli nodded slowly, processing this. "I want to be like that. Like you and Grandma. Someone who opens doors. You already are. Every day you show up here, work beside people, help where help is needed, you're opening doors." As midnight approached, someone called for a countdown. The cooperative members gathered, children and adults mixed together, counting down to a new year that held promises none of them could fully predict, but all of them could help shape. 10, 9, 8. Nate looked around at the faces illuminated by the workshop's warm light. Grant and Eli standing together, building a new relationship after loss. Marcus with his family, stability written across all their faces. Teresa laughing with Patricia, both of them transformed by meaningful work. The newer members still learning, still growing, but already part of the fabric of community. 5, 4, 3. He thought about Evelyn, about the gift she'd given that went so far beyond money, about Sarah, who'd challenged them to grow even when it was uncomfortable, about every person who'd passed through these doors, added their piece to what they were building. 2, 1. Happy New Year. The room erupted in cheers and embraces. Lily and Mia tackled Nate in a hug, their joy pure and uncomplicated. Grant caught his eye across the room, raised a glass in silent toast. Nate returned the gesture, acknowledging everything spoken and unspoken between them. The party wound down slowly, families heading home to start the new year in warmth and safety. Nate was one of the last to leave, making sure the workshop was secure. The heat turned down, everything ready for Monday when they'd start again. He stood alone in the quiet space, running his hand over a workbench worn smooth by a year of labor, and let himself feel the full weight of gratitude. For Evelyn's unexpected gift, for Grant's willingness to take a chance, for every person who'd believed in the possibility of something better, for the rainstorm that had brought it all together. His phone buzzed. A text from Grant. "Thank you for everything this year. Mom would be so proud of what we built." "I know I am." Nate typed back. "We built it together, all of us. That's what made it work." The response came quickly. "That's exactly right. Happy New Year, partner." Nate smiled, pocketed his phone, and headed home. The streets were quiet, most of Rockford already settled in for the night. But as he walked, he saw lights in windows, families gathered together, people finding warmth and connection in the cold January night. He thought about all the doors in this town, some open, some closed, all of them representing choices about how we treat each other, what we owe to strangers, whether kindness matters when it costs us something. A year ago, he'd made a choice in a rainstorm, opened a door when logic said keep it closed, helped people when he could barely help himself. That choice had cascaded into everything that came after, the cooperative, the community, the lives changed and futures rebuilt. And he understood now what Evelyn had been trying to tell him that night, what she'd written in her note. Kindness isn't just about the moment. It's about the ripple effects, the chain reactions, the way one choice to help can multiply into something far bigger than you ever imagined. He reached his house, their house, his and the girls', and stood for a moment looking at the warm light spilling from the windows. Inside were his daughters, safe and thriving. Inside was security built from nothing, hope constructed from desperation, a future that had seemed impossible now made real. Nate opened the door and stepped into warmth, into home, into a life that proved every single day that opening doors matters, that kindness cascades, that we rise together or fall alone. The storm had passed, the door had opened, and everything that came after was simply the long, beautiful work of building community from the simple foundation of choosing to help when help was needed most. Tomorrow they'd start again, creating, building, supporting each other through whatever challenges came. But tonight, in this moment, Nate let himself rest in the knowledge that they'd done something meaningful. They'd proved another way was possible. They'd transformed one rainy night of kindness into a legacy that would outlast them all. And that, he thought, as he closed the door behind him and heard his daughter's laughter from the other room, that was more than enough. That was everything.